Those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometers have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies. Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
We are coming in hot, top of the morning. It's 3 minutes past 6 on a Sunday morning. I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Talk Breakfast. A very busy show on this Remembrance Sunday. Why is this day so important? I'll be asking some of the country's finest military veterans. But given the dire state of modern Britain in 2025, was that fight in vain? That's the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch at 8 o'clock. You won't want to miss it. It might get me cancelled, Dan. Good. Because I'm Dan Dare this morning, pilot of the future. We'll be joined by former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe for her reflections on the sacrifice of our war heroes and the state of modern Britain. Can we reclaim this country? Can we make Britain again? Meanwhile, breaking this morning, Labour MPs call on the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood to soften her migration plans. You heard me right. She wants to soften the migration plans and open the borders further. We'll bring you more on this growing political row, which could see numbers coming into the country explode rather than shrink. Plus, Labour MPs don't want to cut spending, but have now just told the government and told Rachel Reeves that she can't raise taxes either. An all-out civil war is breaking out within the governing party of this country. We will bring you the inside story. The headline is, at 5 minutes past 6 on a Sunday morning, that this Labour government is a hot mess, folks. It is a hot mess. Speaking about a hot mess, shall we talk about our national state broadcaster, the glorious, morally upstanding BBC, whose stars are worth £1 million a year to play records in the morning on Radio 2? Well, let me tell you that the BBC bias row rages on, with Donald Trump threatening revenge on our national state broadcaster. Is it time now to axe the hated licence fee? I'll be asking one of the BBC's former big stars, who says the TV tax has had its day. Even Boris Johnson, right, who's worth millions. Boris is worth millions now. He's not paying the TV tax. Did you know that? He said, I'm not paying it. He said, come and arrest me. Just imagine Boris Johnson, political prisoner. So we've got a lot to get through. It is 6 minutes past 6. I want to make you part of the show because your calls are always the highlight of the programme. 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number. That's how you call me, and that's how we get to talk on the radio and on TV. 0344 499 1000. Kushti is taking your calls today, and let me tell you, she's on form. She is cooking with gas, as is executive producer Dan, engineer Dave, and putting out the TV product today is the one and only Davis, because we are the radio and we love that. DAB+, that is the DNA of talk, isn't it? The radio, the wireless. Well, we talk a lot of sense. It's the home of common sense. You can do that on the radio. You can do it in-app. You can do it in the car. But you know something? You can watch us as well. This is a TV show with amazing stars like Anne Widdecombe coming up later in the show. So what do you need to do? You go to YouTube, search Talk, and up we pop. So, as the saying goes, let's talk. And engineer Dave has just revealed that my microphone, which I look after myself, was tucked inside my jacket. A slightly muffled effort there for that opening menu. But let me tell you, metaphorically and literally, I will not be silenced. And you're going to love today's Dolan's Dispatch, I've got to say, at 8 o'clock this morning. It's a beast. And it might get me cancelled. I actually want it to get me cancelled, because these days, if you tell the truth, you will be cancelled. So that is the metric, really, isn't it? If you've been cancelled, you were telling the truth. So let's hope that happens. Really excited about today's show. I'm going to do so in the company of Charlie Rowley, who's one of the finest political analysts in the country. Good morning, Charlie.
Oh, good morning, Mark. That's so kind of you to say.
Well, listen, the reason why is because you take a look at the world and the country with very clear eyes, dispassionate, very rational, and we can say on Remembrance Sunday that what the heroes of 2 world wars did for us is incalculable. There are no words. We are not worthy. But their legacy is under threat given the poor state of this country, how it's run, the loss of culture, the loss of law and order. And therefore, on Remembrance Sunday, we reflect on what was sacrificed, but we also reflect on the challenge that lies ahead to preserve their legacy so that this becomes a great country again.
100%. And no more has that been reflected in, I think a lot of people would have seen an interview on Good Morning Britain. Yes. A couple of days ago, if not yesterday. Time has sort of elapsed.
It's all
at
in a
these
blur.
Weird hours.
Alec Penstone, 100 years of age,
Yep.
and a hero all over again.
Absolutely, absolutely. And couldn't be more the voice of what this country's feeling, where he said so emotionally and actually really desperately that he didn't think actually the fight and the sacrifice that all of his friends and colleagues and brothers and sisters in arms had given up, had sacrificed, he didn't think it was worth it for what the country is today. That is so sad to hear, but it's a feeling that actually a lot of us can understand. And when challenged, wrongly, I think, to ask what did he mean by that, we all know what he meant by that. It's a country now where crime is up, where you don't have integration amongst your community, where you can't go and talk to your neighbour without probably getting fear of sort of crossing the road and getting your watch snatched or being mugged or whatever, where you see more flags in this country that are not the Union flag or the St George's Cross. It could probably be a Palestinian flag on a weekend or any other given day in every other city centre right up and down the country, and where English is not necessarily the #1 language in some of our towns and cities. That is appalling. And to couple that with illegal migration, where you're seeing thousands of people, records of people coming into this country, where we don't seem to be able to stop that flow of people, where when you do come into the country illegally, you seem to get first priority, hotels and all the rest of it, when there are veterans today still sleeping rough. That is not fair, and that is not the country that people like Alec and his colleagues defended. That is not the country that I think the overwhelming majority of people want to see, which is why I think today will be such a moving day. And I think there'll be thousands of people coming to London and cenotaphs all over the country to commemorate, because people feel, actually, that I think that we've lost something about this country that they want to get back.
Most definitely. And can we put paid to this idea that a conversation around culture and integration is in any way racist? I think it's the opposite of racist, actually, because what we're talking about here, there is no issue with a multi-ethnic society. We began to have a multi-ethnic society straight after the Second World War, and it continued for decades with highly productive, well-integrated immigration, particularly if you look at, the public sector, the NHS and all the rest of it. But not just that, the world of finance and business. And my accountant is a British Asian man who's incredibly successful and has given so much to this country. So that's not the issue. It is about national identity. And as we look back today on Remembrance Sunday, I think it's our duty and responsibility to look forward as well. And I think, Charlie, to understand that what this country needs now is seismic change. A borderline political, economic and cultural revolution, and one in which we reassert British values. What we have to do, I think, Charlie, is reboot the entire country. What we have to do is unplug it like a computer and then plug it back in again and go back to what our essence is.
I think that's absolutely right, because for too long, the people in power and the people that have been around power and the institutions that basically run the country, whether it's government, Whitehall, whether it's the Bank of England, whether it's the BBC, whether it's institutions that we've all held at a very high regard. Even the NHS needs total reform. It's a whole other topic, I know, but these big institutions that we've praised as it's some sort of religion, and that these people know best and that they've always been right. I was a sucker for it.
We all fell for it back in the day.
Because I lost my grandfather last year, who's 95, who has a veteran's badge medal that I'll be wearing proudly today.
Will you? Yeah.
But he had the same views as that Alec comrade, and I would always dismiss my granddad's view of the world. I was part of the metropolitan elite that thought, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Actually, we've progressed as a society. This is all progress. And of course, you take a step back and you look at the world plainly and you read the newspapers, you have conversations with real people, you get back into real society, you're away from Whitehall, you're away from the confines of government, you're away from the day-to-day civil service notes that they plonk in front of you to say these are the stats, and actually, no, all the speculation or all the chatter in the media, that's not right, because actually we've got the facts, minister or special advisor, whoever you are, and you just dismiss everybody, when actually you can see it as plain as day that the people that have been wrong or misled or just told us there's nothing to worry about, keep calm, carry on. No, we can't keep calm anymore. We shouldn't be carrying on. We need to stop and do exactly as you said. That's a brilliant metaphor. Pull the plug out, restart, because communities are fractured, the economy is on its knees, society is not what it used to be, and we're not proud of ourselves as a country anymore. And that is a great, great shame. And that does need seismic change to reboot ourselves and to get us back off our knees and onto our feet.
Well, I think so. And I think it's economic, I think it's political, and I also think it's cultural. I think it's all three of those things. It's economic because we live beyond our means. So even an idiot would be able to look at the balance sheet and see what's going out and what's coming in and understand that that's not sustainable. We are slowly heading towards insolvency. We are. And that's just mathematically the case. So you've got that. So that the economy needs a complete reboot, which will essentially involves massive reduction in the size of the state, which has become massive, but particularly grew during COVID. So you've got to shrink the state, and you've got to change what welfare is to becoming a safety net again, not a way of life, because it just can't be afforded. So that's the economy. Get taxes down so that you can have... This was Margaret Thatcher's metaphor, by the way, that she talked about how in society you hand out resources as though it were a cake, and everyone gets a slice of the cake. And she said that there are people that are needy, that have less in society. So what they need is they need more cake. And so she said what her solution to do is not to make the cake sort of go further, grow the cake itself. Bigger cake, bigger slices. That's what economic growth is, isn't it? It's national income. So you've got to do that. You've obviously got to look at law and order and the sort of culture of, shoplifting and antisocial behaviour, knife crime, all of that stuff. And then cultural, the social contract, what it means to be British and what your duty is as a British person, which is to put your litter in the bin, to stop at the red lights even if you're on a bicycle, to be polite to the elderly, to give up your seat on a train, to get up in the morning and work and try with great effort never to draw benefits unless circumstances make that impossible not to. We're not following any of these unspoken conventions anymore, are we?
No, we're not. And, the challenge to all of those, you can just imagine the conversation will be, right, okay, if we've got to reboot the economy, there'll be a large section, hopefully it's a dwindling number, but it's a large section still of people that were saying, right, well, we need to rejoin the EU again, which is not the answer. I don't think.
A dying economic bloc.
A dying
Good luck with that.
bloc. But these are the people that are still saying, well, the reason why the economy is dying. In fact, Rachel Reeves tried to blame it on Brexit for some of the...
Which she hasn't mentioned since she won power. Breakfast. I can't be one of those presenters that says breakfast. She hasn't mentioned Brexit until this year.
Exactly. But it just, the most obvious thing is you can't, on the one hand, I mean, look, if you want to go down that route of saying, actually, no, we should be rejoining the EU because that's how we're going to get our economic credibility again. Okay, that's an argument, and you're entitled to that argument, but you can't have that argument on the one hand while saying, oh, what a great trade deal we've got with the US and with India, which you would never have had if you were in the EU. You've got to pick a lane.
You've got to pick a lane. Going back into the EU, I mean, that's a guaranteed £20 billion a year, isn't it? That's the cost of membership. So that's already, and as we'd be a net contributor, we'd only get a fraction of that back, maybe 7 or 8 billion. So there you go. So that's a net loss of 12 billion a year already. Then you would have the euro, because we would have to have the euro to go back in, because that would be a term of membership. We'd have Schengen and free movement. I mean, literally, the idea that somehow going back into the EU would help our problems wouldn't. And by the way, but this is something that's very underreported, which is that we have free trade with the EU. We have a comprehensive tariff-free trading relationship with the bloc. We already have. What you have is a little friction on goods, which is not a problem for the bigger players, and it is a small issue for that little company in Chichester that does fingerless gloves. That ultimately, that's not a hill to die on, is it, really, for our economy?
No, exactly. And look, for any economic change, there's always going to be, as people will find out in the budget, winners and losers. However, in this budget, there'll be far many more losers, I think, than winners. So brace.
Well, that's exactly right. The governing party of this country in the full throes of a civil war. It's all over. Tomorrow's front pages, which are next. all good at this.
I mean, it is really heartbreaking to see, you know, a gentleman like that when he's talking and reflecting back on his military service and what that means for him now. Of course, it's incredibly moving. You know, I'm a veteran myself. I served in Afghanistan. And when I heard him speaking, I think it really sort of made me reflect on my own service in Afghanistan. And also, I was kind of thinking, obviously, he spoke a little bit about why he has the feelings that he does now. But I was also just reflecting on what kind of things made me feel the same way as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Mick in Wallington has messaged the show. He sent a text, the word talk, and his message to 87222. And he said, Mark, Keir Starmer looked pathetic, weak and totally out of place at the service of remembrance, whilst Hannah Waddington looked inspirational, powerful, relevant and professional. Well, Mick, we're going to have a look at the current travails of our Prime Minister, whose own party is in the full throes of a civil war. More on that in just a moment. Sharon says, good morning, Mark and Charlie. Well, I went into the town centre where I grew up and I thought, what the hell is going on here? And where am I? We are definitely a minority in this country for sure. Colin says, Mark, my great-grandfather gave the ultimate sacrifice for his country, king and family. Please tell me his death was not in vain. Well, Colin, that's going to be the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch at 8 a.m. and I'll be putting that question to Anne Widdecombe, former government minister, later in the show. We've got Papa Anderson, who says, here we go again. We were not multi-ethnic just after the Second World War in the early 90s. We were 95% white. We became multi-ethnic since 2000 under Blair, and we didn't vote for it. It is cultural suicide. Multiculturalism means no culture. Well, I'll certainly be a very, very vocal critic of the failed multicultural experiment in the Dispatch at 8, and I think you'll appreciate it. Do stay tuned for that one. Good morning, Mark and Charlie, says John in Liverpool. Love watching both of you. Well, let me give you a wave, John, because I guess you're watching on YouTube. Just head to YouTube and search the word talk and up we pop. He says, the trouble with humankind, we forget what the generation before told us. We think we know better. They can't be right. Then we get to that age and we're the ones not being listened to and can see what the problems are. I've seen it with my own eyes. This goes with anything and everything. We never learn as humans. John's quite right about that, isn't he? Because, for example, socialism doesn't work. History will tell you that. But yet, every generation must fight the battle against this left-wing ideology.
Totally.
It never goes away.
No, no, because it's particularly for those on the left who feel that they are the saviours of every minority or cause or
and they're the good people, don't forget.
And they are always the good people. Therefore, it requires money, it requires funding. And who should be paying for it? Those nasty capitalists and those people that dare to earn money. Whether it's a huge amount, whether it's a medium-sized amount, we've got to tax you in order to fund other people. We've got to rob Peter to pay Paul. And that's how the system goes. And you should put up with that. And it's ideological because you want to help. As humans, we want to help people. We want to make sure that everybody's okay. You know, that's our human instinct. But you know, there comes a point where actually it's not about the handouts, it's the help-ups that you want in society. And that is where socialism always falls down, because, as Margaret Thatcher used to say, sooner or later you always run out of other people's money. Well,
that's right. And I think what's interesting about the left, how ingenious they are, is first of all, they've appropriated language by calling themselves progressives. And now in America, those on the left are called liberals. Well, being progressive and being liberal are both very great things to aspire to, but that is an Orwellian mangling of the language, because there's nothing progressive about socialism, which leads to penury and bankruptcy and human misery and death. Yes. And there's nothing progressive about a culture in the classroom that teaches kids that our history is wicked and evil, that there are 100 genders. That's all regressive and, frankly, I would argue, immoral. So why is it, how is it that the right and small c conservatives have allowed the left to appropriate the idea of the good people and the moral high ground. How's that possible? Why can't Conservatives get out there and say, no, we hate inequality as well. We hate poverty. We hate human suffering.
So I think that's absolutely right. And I think that cycle for too long was Labour spend, tax, borrowing, more spend, more tax, more borrowing, falling out of government, the Tories having to come in to clean up the mess. So it was always seen as making tough decisions, and therefore always had that label of, whether it's through austerity, because you have to make those tough choices. When someone overspends, you've got to tighten the belt. And that's exactly what successive Tory governments have had to do. I think David Cameron tried to shake that off. So when he came into power in 2010, albeit as part of a coalition, wanted to protect funding for the NHS, something that was usually seen as a sacred cow of the left, and particularly the Labour Party. Introducing things like same-sex marriage, wanted to detoxify what was sort of, the traditions of a Conservative Party, and how it supported marriage in the past, to try and become more liberal, to become more socially acceptable, as it were, to mainstream British opinion, I suppose. But obviously, since then, I think we've had chopping and changing of Tory leaders over the last 14 years, consumed by Brexit, consumed by COVID. It's taken its eye off the ball to allow this hard left fascination of the right, calling us, the nasty party, that if you dare talk about immigration, you must be racist or far right. You can't possibly think that anybody coming over in a small boat is nothing more than a genuine refugee, or somebody that is seeking refuge, having fleeing persecution. Of course they're not. Economic migrants, of course they're all in need. No, they're not. But if you
and they're all doctors and engineers. Don't forget.
Absolutely, and and they're all women and children. They're not boats full of working young men coming across. It is ridiculous.
I think it's time for the right and people in the centre ground as well to reclaim the moral case for conservatism, small c conservatism, which, by the way, even the Tories abandoned, worth pointing out, because we had the open borders and net zero madness under Boris Johnson. And, this has been this project of progressivism within the UK has been decades in the making on the part of both main parties, which is why Labour are now completely in retreat, as are the Tories. Go figure. Yes. You reap what you sow. Well, let's take a look at tomorrow's front pages as promised, and we will start with the Mail on Sunday. Boris's blast at arrogant BBC presenter Nick Robinson for claiming Bias Row is an anti-BBC plot. The row over BBC Bias deepened last night after two of its leading presenters claimed that airing concerns about its coverage was part of a political campaign to destroy the corporation. Nick Robinson's remarks, later endorsed as exactly right by veteran reporter John Simpson, were swiftly condemned as ridiculous and arrogant by former PM Boris Johnson, whose vow to withhold his licence fee over the impartiality issue sparked yesterday's outburst. Curious, isn't it, how well-paid stars at the BBC are defending themselves and circling the wagons to defend the corporation.
Yeah, who'd have thunk it, eh?
On the payroll.
On the payroll. Bastions themselves, veterans of the BBC themselves, defending it. Well, who knew? But there has to be recognition within the BBC when mainstream political opinion, or mainstream opinion in general, has shifted towards lots of people not wanting to pay the licence fee because of the output of the BBC. And we're not now talking about just a few rogue presenters that were operating under the radar that gave the BBC a bad reputation. We're not talking about maybe a presenter like Gary Lineker that was able to tweet things where others weren't able to, or because he was actually a freelancer, it was a different kind of contract, or we have an external company that's created the show that we've just sort of booked it like Strictly Come Dancing, so we're not responsible for the bullying. This is now editorial output. This is the Bob Villain at Glastonbury rapping, singing, whatever he was doing, obscenities about Israel that should not have been broadcast, that should have been pulled, but editorial decisions.
Whilst the Director General was at Glastonbury with a cold beer in his hand.
Exactly. Editorial decisions to allow a documentary on Panorama about a very, very difficult topic, whether it's the conflict in Gaza and with Israel. But the documentary was created and was about to go live on Panorama by someone with links to Hamas. How that got through is beyond a joke. And now the doctoring of President Donald Trump Again, another Panorama BBC special, he's splicing together two shots of Donald Trump that looked as though he was inciting violence on January 6th on Capitol Hill, something he did not say, just to spin a wheel, just to fulfil someone else's judgment at the BBC. That breaks all the rules of what a public sector broadcaster is all about. So that's why people are outraged, and not when you just let that go. You then, on the other side, you haul over poor old Martine Krotzel over the coals for correctly using an auto cue to say that pregnant women as opposed to pregnant people, when she's been absolutely castigated. But all this other stuff has been allowed to just, I'm so sorry that this was just a mere oversight. It's not an oversight. There's clearly issues within the BBC, and to be fair, I think Boris is right to call them out.
Yes, the BBC is certainly not fit for purpose. Are you still paying the licence fee? Let me know, 03444 99 1000. If not, have you joined Boris Johnson in your boycott? Let me know why, if that is the case. Next up, we've got more front pages, plus Labour descend into a bitter civil war just a year and a bit into power. Is Keir Starmer now on borrowed time? That's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
You're listening to Talk Breakfast. Did those who gave so much in 2 world wars do so in vain? That is the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch at 8 a.m. You will not want to miss it. But let's have a look at some more front pages. The Sunday Times, BBC's apology for doctoring Trump speech. The BBC chairman is expected to apologise tomorrow and admit that the corporation made a significant mistake in airing a doctored clip of a speech by President Trump. It wasn't a mistake! Stop gaslighting us! We had Roger Bolton on yesterday, who's a former BBC executive and a former BBC presenter, right? Not the other Bolton, the guy with the curly hair with the guitar. No, Roger Bolton. And let me tell you that he said the same thing. It was an oversight and error. It wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate, misleading edit. It was propaganda that you and I are paying for. A night to remember the Princess of Wales and Prince George at the Royal Albert Hall for the Festival of Remembrance, an evening of music and performances honouring members of the armed forces for their services. William, business is falling short on climate. The Prince of Wales has criticised big business for falling short and lacking courage in their attempts to tackle climate change. Prince William, who spent 5 days last week in Brazil for his Earthshot Prize Awards and the COP30 climate conference, is deeply frustrated by the private sector's apathy on the environment. Lammy warned PM on absences. David Lammy privately urged the Prime Minister to rein in his overseas travel, warning that frequent trips abroad risked distracting him from urgent challenges at home. Well, it's hardly a surprise because before the election, Keir Starmer was asked, what do you prefer, Westminster or Davos in Switzerland? And he said Davos all day long. Why? Because he is a pen-pushing bureaucrat and an unapologetic, undiluted, globalist who cares more about the international elite than he does about ordinary British people. Just my opinion. Boss in 225 million PPE deal arrested. The founder of an investment company that secured a huge PPE contract has been arrested as part of an investigation by HM Revenue and Customs into non-payment of tax. Let's have a look at the Observer. Generation game. Rachel Sylvester on the Chancellor's 2 up, 2 down budget for the young. Meg Nolan on the fairy tale of New York. Zach Polanski on the Zoran effect. Anthony Selden on Remembrance Sunday. Mail on Sunday, Boris's blast at arrogant Nick Robinson for claiming Bias Row is an anti-BBC plot. And Davina McCall, the breast cancer poster that saved my life. She has been diagnosed with breast cancer. She's been treated for it. I believe she's doing well. And of course, we wish her a speedy recovery. Very talented broadcaster that she is. Sunday Express, victory for our heroes. MOD to pay overseas commemoration costs so fallen comrades can be honoured. And Kate and George join royals at spectacular Remembrance Festival. Sunday People, Davina breast cancer shock. Star found lump while filming Masked Singer. Sunday Mirror campaign victory. Medals for nuke test heroes. More veterans involved in H-bomb testing in the Cold War are to be commemorated for their service. The Nuclear Test Medal will go to heroes who tracked blasts in the Pacific, but critics say some men have still been left out. Well done to the Mirror for that campaign. Daily Star Sunday. Star gets all clear after shock diagnosis. Davina, my breast cancer battle. And the Sunday Telegraph. BBC to say sorry for doctored Trump speech. Those are your front pages. With me in the studio reacting to the big stories of the day is Charlie Rowley, former Conservative Special Advisor and dropper of truth bombs. Speaking of truth bombs, here's a voice note on the subject of the Prime Minister Keir Starmer from Hev. Take it away, Hev.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's Heath from Kent here. Well, you know, we all want Starmer out, but what's the alternative? Calamity Lammy. I mean, that is just absolutely terrifying. You really wouldn't think that he could get worse than Starmer, but I'm sure he can. I mean, it's oh my God, you know, where do we go from here?
Your frustration is something that's echoed around the country, Hev. My viewers and listeners totally agree with you. We're world weary. I can only tell you, there's going to be 2 things that I'm going to do on Talk Breakfast. Okay, here are my 2 commitments. First of all, I will always say it as I see it. Okay, I will give you my truth. Well, I open my eyes, I open my ears, I've got half a brain cell, and I'll always tell you as I see it. And the other thing that I will do is I will always seek to be positive. I actually will. So you get the truth from me, unalloyed. I might get cancelled, good. But you'll also get positive energy because that's the only way we move forward. And so what I'm going to tell you, Hev, and everyone listening, and Charlie Rowley and the team, is that we're in a terrible state. We're bankrupt. Society's crumbling. We've got open borders. It's a hot mess. I will tell you that things always get worse before they get better. And in many ways, if things are absolutely decimated and broken by the next election, which I predict they will be, that's the moment where you hit rock bottom and that's where change begins. And I think things get worse before they get better. And get better, they will. Keep the faith. Anyhow, listen, Charlie, can we talk about rather an interesting development legally? And this is also in the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Right to criticise Islam is protected under British law, judge rules. The view that Islam is problematic and should be criticised is a protected belief under equalities law, a judge has ruled. Patrick Lee was found guilty of misconduct by the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries last April over posts on X. After a 4-year disciplinary process, he was banned from the professional body and ordered to pay nearly 23 grand in costs. The trade body ruled that 42 of his posts that criticised Islam, including calling the Prophet Muhammad a monster, were either offensive or inflammatory or both, adding that 29 were designed to demean or insult Muslims. But following an employment tribunal hearing, the actuary has won legal protection for his beliefs. Praise the Lord, Charlie. Common sense has prevailed.
Yeah, exactly, as you'd expect, because this government in particular have been pursuing the idea of Islamophobia as a law, as something that can be siphoned off against all other religions that should be protected in a particular way against all others, which I think is fundamentally wrong. There is no definition. There shouldn't be, because you should, as this judge has rightly ruled, be able to criticise any religion. And I think the idea that we have enough laws as well, by the way, to cover everyone together. What is so divisive within this country is if you start an idea of segregating different cultures, different religions, and treating them either higher or lower than others. We have hate speech laws in this country, that protect people from genuine hate crimes. But when there is a problem, if you have a problem with, you can criticise Christianity, you can criticise Islam. That is your right. That is called free speech, which for too long we all feel as though we've been silenced, because again, if you do dare say anything against another particular religion or a culture, you're far right, or you're deemed a racist. And we've had that for far too long, which has made people, the majority of people, who are just speaking common sense, who are just speaking plainly or raising a concern, it's allowed those people to actually look inwardly or feel that they can't speak. And those conversations then either go into the dark web, and you never know where those conversations go, which is obviously a dangerous place. We should be voicing our concerns. We should always be free to speak our minds, and for that to be challenged as well. But luckily this judge has ruled, I think, the right way.
As we discussed earlier, the left, and it is the left, have weaponised and co-opted language to their own ends. So therefore they've appropriated words like progressive and what was the other one? Progressive and liberal. Right. So, and by the way, the left are not liberal, they're illiberal, and they're not progressive, they're regressive. So that's the issue. And similarly, they've done that with the word Islamophobia, because we can all agree that anti-Muslim hatred is obscene and unforgivable. But that's quite different from Islamophobia. Islam is a religion. And therefore, as you say, you know, there should be protections to attack people of a certain race, but not protections to attack a faith belief. And of course, Islam is not a race. And this is why the left are so duplicitous when they allow this word to, you know, be at the heart of this conversation, Islamophobia. There's no such thing. And here's the other point, Charlie. We shouldn't just be able to criticise religion, I would argue. We actually have to. And I say that as a Roman Catholic, because the Catholic Church has had, and perhaps still has a problem, certainly has had in the past, a huge issue with paedophile priests, right? Unique to the Catholic Church. It's a Catholic Church problem. And therefore you have to actually pinpoint that religion as having a cultural issue within it. Well, if you had the equivalent issue within Islam, you wouldn't be able to do that if there was an Islamophobia law. You wouldn't be able to call out the rape gangs, who in certain parts of the country have been almost exclusively Muslims.
Precisely, 100%. And it's about scrutiny. Everybody should feel scrutinised, everybody should feel challenged, every religion, every part of society. That's how you actually make that progress. And the problem also with the left is, you're absolutely right, that there is only equality if you agree with their equality. You know, and it's all, you know, if you take things like, I mean, I remember the Pride marches, you know, something that happens every year in London. There's Pride in London, but I think this year they excluded anybody that was from a political party. So even, you know, I mean, I'm not obviously a Labour Party supporter, but they wouldn't allow anybody from a political party, whether it's Labour, the Conservatives, Reform, Liberals, march because they didn't want... And you think, well, hang about. You can't just define who you want to be, supposedly, that ticks all of your boxes, and that's fine, and exclude everybody else. It's only equal if it's on their terms.
Andrew Neil thinks that Keir Starmer will be out in months. You heard me right. Andrew Neil, one of the country's most respected journalists, thinks that Keir Starmer will be out at number 10 in months. Is he right? That's next.
all good at this end, apart from this rather disturbing poll that says 8 in 10 say the nation is divided now. That wasn't meant to be the order of events in the 21st century.
It certainly wasn't, and I was deeply troubled by the comment we had earlier by somebody who had literally fought for this country in the Second World War. And to think that those that gave their lives, those that risked their lives to fight for this great country, are now looking at the state that we're currently in and thinking, you know what, this wasn't worth it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
So many messages coming in. People are texting the word talk in their message to 87222. Lovely to have your company. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan. It is 6:47. I returned to the home of common sense just a couple of months ago, and I've got to tell you, it's a privilege to be back. It's an honour to be back. Thank you for having me. Sharon has messaged the show. Rachel Reeves needs to cut welfare for definite. That is where the cuts need to be made. Why the hell does she feel that taxpayers need to fund these people's lifestyle that stay in bed all the time and get up whenever they want? They can shop and order things from Uber Eat all day when we have to get up and go to work. Sharon, you're so right. Well, the shocking news statistic is that over 50% of the population take out more from the system than they put in. That is a dysfunctional business model. It won't work, and it's the road to bankruptcy. This from Margaret in Yorkshire. Good morning, Margaret. Welcome to Talk Breakfast. Margaret says, Mark, my father in World War II was on 2 different vessels that were sunk during the conflict. And on one occasion, returning to port in Southampton, walked to his mother's house only to find it wasn't there. It had been bombed, and people got on with it as that's what you had to do. Margaret, that could be text of the day. You are so right. That resilience, that backbone, that stamina, that ability to roll your sleeves up and get on with life is something that's sorely missing in younger society, particularly among younger people. I've got to say, I love being a broadcaster. I wouldn't mind being a school teacher as well. And I would address the class every day and go, let me tell you that life is difficult and you've got to get on with it. You've got to roll your sleeves up. And when God gives you lemons, you make lemonade. I think I'd be a great teacher. They wouldn't learn anything, but they'd have a bit of backbone and common sense. Right, listen, what about this from John in Glasgow? The most practical and common sense move we should make first is simply turn off the benefits. Many would leave straight off the bat. We are subsidising their existence. Then go for the Deliveroo and Uber Eats deliveries. Many of them are working illegally. John, interestingly, your point dovetails with that of Sharon. We're in harmony today, aren't we? Cliff in Berkshire. Good morning, Cliff. Cliff says, good morning, Mark and Charlie. The left control education, the left control most of the media, and now they control the justice system. The left have played a blinder. Cliff, no truer word was said. Maggie in London. Good morning, Maggie. Maggie says, good morning, Mark and Charlie. Pay the licence fee. No chance. I've not watched BBC for over 3 years. Why should I pay for propaganda and lies? Phil says, good morning on such a special day where we honour our fallen heroes and heroines. I can't believe what I've just witnessed. The BBC have marked this occasion by interviewing an RAF wing commander regarding diversity in the forces and how hard it was for him. Please, not on this day. Phil, you're absolutely right. Worth pointing out, by the way, that the Royal British Legion, which is a great charity, they do a great job, they have a diversity officer that's on 55 grand a year. So when you put your quid into the box, into the tin for the poppies on Remembrance Weekend, some of that is going to pay a diversity officer. Make it make sense. Natasha says, hi Mark, I've gone right off the monarchy. I've served my country and pledged allegiance to the late Queen and was so proud of the monarchy. However, William needs to butt out of telling business what to do and forcing his eco-zealotry on them. That's Natasha. Natasha, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, and I hope you'll be listening later in the show, because we're going to strike up that conversation with our head-to-head political panel. And I'm going to be asking, has Prince William, the Prince of Wales, crossed the line politically by telling businesses they're not doing enough for net zero? So, Natasha, thank you for being an important editorial voice in the show. We're going to talk about William and politics after 8 o'clock. Good morning, Mark, says Stuart. Great show. And keep saying it how it is, please, because that's why I watch Talk. Stuart, I will. I will always tell you the truth as I see it, and I will always be positive. Someone that's always positive is Charlie Rowley, who's with me, who's a former Conservative Special Advisor. Charlie, do you miss the cut and thrust of the political nerve centre advising ministers and prime ministers? Of course you do.
I'm not
Must
sure.
be exciting, and then going into number 10.
It is, but it's, the novelty wears off, because when you get behind that door, you know what you're faced with, which is the blob of people that feel as though they've already made the decision, that it's a bit of a stitch-up, that you then try and have to unpick anything. People are sort of going over your head. They're making decisions through the back door. They're not briefing you properly because there's a crisis, but they don't want to tell you there's a crisis because that means somebody might get into trouble. And then all of a sudden, it's every front page 2 days later, and nobody tells you. Then you really do have to go into crisis mode. It's that kind of drama and stress that, you can do without.
Most definitely. Well, as a young man, I was a parliamentary research assistant, and what I learned is how powerless MPs are. But I wasn't as close to government as you've been. And clearly, if you're in the corridors of power, you realise that it is the blob that will put the brakes on everything. And they are in the throes of leftist ideology. They're in the groupthink of progressivism, which is going to be a problem even if Reform UK win the next election, because this goes beyond politics. It's the institutions of this country, the judiciary, the civil service, the BBC, all those things you've mentioned. So how does one dismantle the power of the blob? How can it be done?
By, as you said earlier on, pulling out the plug and putting it back in. But when you put that plug back in...
Do you have to fire people? I mean, is that, literally, what would Prime Minister Farage have to do? Does he have to sack half the civil service?
I think you'd have to certainly, reduce the size of the civil service, but you'd have to put in the most qualified people in areas where, if you want to get housing in this country, you have to, I think, probably tear out the people that have been working on housing policy for the last 14 years under successive governments that haven't got it right, and put in someone that knows how to build a house. The same with business, the same with tax, the same with the health service. Genuine people that are keen to see reform of the NHS. Everybody knows it needs reform. Everybody knows that there are too many people that are using the NHS when they don't need to be. They know that there are too many people who are turning up at A&E when they, or at the GP appointments, and if they can't get GP appointment, they turn up in A&E. All of this we know. So how do you tackle that? Well, you put medical professionals that are really prepared to get a grip of it and shake it up.
Yes, I mean, my theory about reform or any... Because the point is, right, I am not a proponent of any political party. All I want is change. I don't care who does it. If Keir Starmer, in the next 3.5 years, stops the boats, reduces legal net migration to the tens of thousands, axes net zero, reduces taxes, gets the economy growing, then I'm all in. I'll be like, do you know something? I was wrong about Starmer. Look at all these things he's done. We're now absolutely laughing all the way to the bank. We're reducing the debt. But obviously that's not going to happen. But the issue is, if someone like Farage gets in, he's got this wall of opposition. My theory, Charlie, is that he's going to need a huge majority and he's going to need 2 terms. Yeah. And those are 2 very big ifs.
2 very big ifs. But the other thing that Farage has got at the moment, which I think is absent in all other politics, maybe Zach Polanski of the Greens, there's a bit of optimism there. But like you need to give people hope. You need to give people optimism.
Sure.
And I think that's what Nigel can do. He'll say how terrible things are at the minute, which is absolutely right, but he's giving a plan how to make things better. And that's how you solve some of the crises, because just taking back to some of those messages where Margaret talked about her family who came back to their house that had been completely bombed, but they got on with it. Couple that with Sharon and Jonathan that were talking about benefits. 5,000 people a day are signing on to benefits because of anxiety. Now, if you have a leader that's providing optimism and hope for the country, those people think, you know what, Prime Minister? I'm behind you. We don't need to go on benefits for anxiety because we feel hopeless and we don't feel we've got a rudderless government. I believe in the project. You know what? I am going to go to work. I am going to get a job. I'm going to make sure that I can provide for my family. I'm not going to take from the state unless I absolutely need to. I'm going to make sure that I'm connected with my neighbour, that my kid's doing well at school, that my kid can at least brush their teeth before they go to school, which is a huge problem in some schools. You know, things like this, societal breakdown, if you have a positive leader with an optimistic outlook and can provide hope for the future, I think that can do wonders for this country.
And the issue we've got, we need change, don't we? Like I said, I don't care who does it, but clearly reform would have the authority and the mandate for this seismic change. You know, the Tories are in transition and they're trying to, you know, rethink the whole project, and Kemi's taking her time quite clearly, which is a debatable strategy. Politics, every election is about change. Every politician says we are the change candidate. No one can argue that reform are not the very definition of the change candidate, possibly as Trump was in November of last year. And interestingly, Trump has gone over the heads of the establishment in order to roll out his policies, including the trade war, the tariff stuff, which has been, short-term quite challenging for the US economy. But what's he done? With that big shock, with that big negotiation, he's improved the terms by which America trades with the world, which will be a lasting legacy. Yeah. So, yes, short-term conflict. In a way, the tariff war in America was sort of America's Brexit. So it was going to be a painful, bumpy transition, but the end result is that companies now pay America to sell goods in the United States that previously they weren't. Meanwhile, the US, I think, now can export goods to the EU free of charge. I mean, that's a great deal. So he's done that. He's closed the southern border, again, with the authority of that mandate that he's won. He won by every metric. And the other thing that he's done is he's stopped using civil servants. So, for example, the man that brokered peace in the Middle East is a real estate entrepreneur, Steve Witkoff. Right? This is a guy that builds hotels. And he's the guy that knocked heads together in Tel Aviv and in Gaza, and we have peace. So it's an unconventional approach where you ignore the establishment and use people that have real-world expertise. That could be the way to go. That may be Farage's direction.
I think that's absolutely right. And you've got to look at the people that voted for Trump. All those different groups and demographics, there were Hispanic Americans, it was Latin Americans, it was Black Americans, it was the LGBT community in America, it was women. He ticked all of these constituents off because all of those people wanted fairness. They all wanted a job. They all wanted a strong economy. They all wanted, if you came into the country as a migrant, they came in illegally. They didn't like the unfairness of, you say, that southern border where people were crossing illegally. They all believed in that American project. And that's why I think if you apply some of that to this country, it doesn't matter about your background. People just want a restored sense of fairness in this country. And whether you like Nigel or not, at least you feel he's got a plan. This government seems to have no plan at all.
Brilliantly put. Fascinating stuff. Not only should you be back in the corridors of power, you should be writing speeches as well. Because at that point, I was about to stand up and start applauding. I'm in tears, I can't lie. Right, listen, we've got a very big 3 hours to come. Cannot do it without you. Book your place on the show, 0344 499 1000. Is it time now to axe the licence fee as the BBC faces a bias row? Well, I'll be speaking to a former BBC star who says the TV tax has had its day. And she's next. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. More front pages. Lots to get through. Keep it talk.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa. And many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the Channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants, and as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Wakey, wakey, rise and shine. It is 3 minutes past 7. Happy Sunday, one and all. I'm Mark Dolan. This is Talk Breakfast. A very busy show on this Remembrance Sunday. Why is this day so important? I'll be asking some of the country's finest military veterans. But given the state of modern Britain, was that fight in vain? Well, that is the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch. And I'll be telling you some truth bombs about the state of this country. It might get me cancelled. Good. That is today's Dolan's Dispatch. Meanwhile, we'll be joined by former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe to look at the importance of Remembrance Sunday and has the legacy of our fallen war heroes been squandered? Meanwhile, breaking this morning, Labour MPs call on the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood to, wait for it, soften her immigration plans. That's right, we'll bring you more on this growing political row, which could see numbers coming into the country explode rather than shrink. Plus, Labour MPs don't want to cut spending, but are now urging the government not to raise taxes either. An all-out civil war is breaking out within the governing party of this country. Just how long has Keir Starmer got? Now, my priority for the next 3 hours is to get your opinions on the national television and radio airwaves. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Give me a call, book your place on the show, and we're going to have a dedicated call section at 7:15 this morning. I want to know your opinions about all the big stories of the day. Did our war heroes give their lives in vain? 0344 499 1000. That's going to be the key topic of the day. Send the word send the word talk in your text to 87222. You can hear us on the radio, but if you want to watch the show, head to YouTube, search the word talk, and up we pop. And as the saying goes, let's talk. So the BBC bias row rages on, with Donald Trump furious about our national state broadcaster's doctoring of his speech on January the 6th. So is it time now to axe the hated BBC licence fee? Has the TV tax had its day? Let's get the views of a former star of BBC television, Sally Jones. Good morning, Sally. Welcome to Talk.
Good morning, Mark. I'm still absolutely shocked at the sheer hypocrisy that's been going on at the BBC. I mean, in many ways, I love a lot of what the BBC does, but the absolute chapter of accidents, well, not accidents, but deliberate sort of falsification of story after story, not just one. One might be a misfortune, but this is an absolute embarrassment, problem after problem, falsification after falsification. And I do think it's time to look at it very closely. And if the license fee is still in place and these sort of mistakes and, as I say, falsification are continuing, I really think it's time to consider it very closely. It will be fascinating to see what Samir Shah and the sort of apology that he's likely to give to the Culture, Media and Sport Committee on Wednesday, or mistake after mistake, amounts to, and whether they can actually do a root and branch rooting out of all the problems that have been going on with Gaza, even with something as stupid as Martine Croxall raising an eyebrow over the, having to say pregnant people and correcting it at the last minute to pregnant women, when Saint Gary Lineker has been allowed to spout biased rubbish, lefty woke rubbish for months on end, showing absolute lack of impartiality. I really think it's time to have a good look at it.
And you don't have to be a Donald Trump supporter, because he's not everyone's cup of tea. You don't have to be a Donald Trump fanatic to be shocked at the doctoring of his speech on January the 6th, which implied that he entreated his followers to go to the Capitol and to be violent. He was actually overt and crystal clear that they should go peacefully and patriotically. What does the doctoring of that speech tell us about the culture of BBC journalism?
I think the fact is that, of course, many people at the BBC think that Donald Trump is awful. A lot of people outside the BBC think that he's a liar, that he's problematic. And obviously, he isn't always entirely free with the truth. The problem was that they never made it clear that they had spliced two or three pieces of interview about an hour apart entirely to falsify the meaning of what was said. And it was particularly hypocritical because they actually put footage of the march itself over where you could have seen the splice. So in general, if you cut from one chunk of interview to another, you see a sort of a jump cut, or people may even leave a couple of seconds blank to show that it's a jump cut. This was done very deliberately to imply and that this was what Trump actually meant, that he was encouraging people to go and riot. And one problem was that it was as though people at the BBC thought, oh, well, that's roughly what I think he means, therefore it's justifiable for us to falsify the actual words he said, and also to do equally damaging things like showing video of the Proud Boys, the far-right group who were marching on the Capitol after the speech, when in fact they had marched down long before the speech started. I think they went down about 11 o'clock when the speech started an hour or two later. So it looked as though the Proud Boys, who many people think are a bunch of thugs, were actually encouraged to go down by Trump, whereas this had actually happened long before. So it's all an attempt to smear Trump. And the worst thing is they don't even seem to get it. Tim Davie hasn't come out of his ivory tower for weeks when people have been trying to get a reaction from him. Samir Shah has been distinctly notable by his absence. And I think there's going to have to be the mother of all apologies on Wednesday. And even so, I'm sure they're going to have to consider their positions after this.
Most definitely. Well, Charlie Rowley is with us in the studio, Sally. And Charlie, this is a big problem for the BBC. The Trump edit is not isolated, is it? You've obviously got a leaked memo that suggests that historians' concerns about the rewriting of history were ignored by the corporation, the peddling of pro-trans narratives while silencing gender-critical feminists, and also the notable bias in the coverage of the war in Gaza with the Arabic service, essentially standing accused of sharing Hamas propaganda. So this is deep within the culture of the BBC.
Absolutely. And Sally was on the money when she basically described this as a deliberate attempt to falsify that particular clip, which is propaganda in its, basic form. It was someone taking a decision to say, I want to show the world, and particularly UK taxpayers who pay the licence fee, this perception of Donald Trump as opposed to the reality. Completely and utterly wrong. But it just shows that the BBC is too big, that there are too many wings to it, there are too many editors and sub-editors and people that can, be passed the buck of responsibility, whether it's BBC Arabic, whether it's BBC Online, that has a different web page and a different story and a different narrative compared to maybe what political editor Chris Mason might be saying, because it knows the people that might be going online compared to people that might be watching the 6 and 10 o'clock news. It is totally dysfunctional because it is simply too big, and it's become too big a beast for one man, Tim Davie, who needs to get a grip on all of this, but clearly hasn't, because there's been scandal after scandal, time after time.
Now, Sally, this is cultural, isn't it? And Charlie and I were talking earlier about the challenges for any future administration of the blob, the bureaucracy, who are in the grip of, I would argue, leftist progressive groupthink. Well, the BBC seems to have the same problem. How do you fix that? Because firing Tim Davie is not a panacea, is it? The problem runs deeper.
Not at all. I've always believed that if you went into any national newsroom, particularly with the opinion-forming sort of programmes like Newsnight, BBC National News, etc., in Portland Place, and you asked them to put their hands up as to who had voted anything else but Labour at the last election, or any election for that matter, you would get a smattering of very, very embarrassed hands going up. I think there's such a culture of this sort of woke, lefty, moral superiority. I mean, I always felt slightly out of place there on the political front. I was not a political journalist. I was a sports and news presenter and reporter. I still have many friends in the BBC. I think in many ways it's a great organisation. But the moment you voiced any view on the unions, on, Brexit, anything else, they all looked at you as though you were something the cat had sicked up.
Yeah.
You were treated like an absolute pariah. And the problem is that it's an echo chamber. They speak to one another. They don't realise what the reality is out in the provinces. I live in the Midlands. Most of my life I've lived in the Midlands. Most of us don't think like that. Most of us have got an ordinary person's view.
Yeah.
This is a sort of ivory tower, Islingtonian sort of view, and they really think they're the stuff. They think they're absolutely, morally superior to the rest of us because they think in this sort of grand way. Mostly they're not having, for example, to live next door to migrants. They don't have much sort of truck with, the sort of violent underbelly which many of us see day to day in our lives. And this is, I think, why they've got this sort of ivory tower view. They can afford to be much more lefty and enlightened and woke than the rest of us.
Yes, and they don't seem to realise that the progressive social democratic ideology is in crisis across the West. It's not working because it leads to unsustainable debt and a fractured society, not to mention the abject failure, in my view, Sally, of the multicultural experiment, which I always stress is different from a multi-ethnic society where everyone, participates in British ideals and values. Going forward, clearly Tim Davie's under pressure. What about the licence fee? What's your view on the licence fee? Is it fit for purpose, Sally? Where do you stand on the funding of the corporation?
I think it's got to be looked at incredibly closely, and I think that there's got to be a real root and branch reform of the BBC before any final decision is made. My feeling is that at the moment, in the state the BBC is, while it does a lot of things brilliantly, I mean, you look at nature documentaries, you look at some of the drama they do, you look at, even now with the reduced amount of sport that they're showing, the sport they do brilliantly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can see that there are also plenty of things that they do that nobody else would or could afford to do. And I think that there might be room for part of the licence fee to be kept for those specific things. But I think they've got to look at the, as you say, woke ideological leftiness of much of their news and current affairs coverage and really take either a total reform of it, or maybe even stripping elements of it out, or putting it out to outside bodies to cover some of that. Because while they brag about their great news service, it's looking increasingly tattered and increasingly biased.
Briefly, Sally, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is refusing to pay the licence fee until this bias row is resolved, and until Tim Davie steps up to the plate. Would you ever consider not paying the licence fee as someone that previously worked for the corporation?
I'm horribly law-abiding and a terrible conformist, so I probably always would pay the licence fee until Parliament and Ofcom decided that it wasn't fit for purpose. And there's so much on the BBC I love. What I really hate is this bias, this disinformation, this falsification. And in a way, I hate to see, you know, a ha'porth of tar spoiling what could otherwise be a good ship. But I really, you know, I can quite see where Boris is coming from on that one.
Sally, it's been a deep privilege to have you on the show. My thanks to Sally Jones, former BBC presenter, who I think you'll agree spoke with such wisdom on the issue of our national state broadcaster. Your reaction, 03444991000. Is it time to axe the hated TV tax? Well, that rhymed. This is poetry at 17 minutes past 7 in the morning. My thanks to Charlie Rowley. Thank you so much for joining us. What a brilliant effort you've put in today. We'll catch up soon.
Hope so. Thanks for having me.
Next up, did our war heroes give their lives in vain? Your calls next.
BBC in crisis with this dossier?
Where do you start? I mean, is it in crisis? I mean, there seems to be a crisis every week. And what we're talking about here is somebody who has an opinion, which whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, is still an opinion. And some of the things that are being said do have to be investigated.
But it's not an opinion to point out that video of Donald Trump was edited.
No, it's an opinion. It's an opinion because obviously it's editing. You edit everything. The fact of the matter is, you make a decision as to whether or not you feel it's actually still reflective of the overall key message.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Did our fallen heroes sacrifice so much for so little in response? What do you think of modern Britain? This is a voice note from Carl on Remembrance Sunday.
Hi Mark, Carl in Bury. On this very poignant, special day, I think it's important that we remember the words from Flanders Fields by John McCrae. If ye break faith, we shall not sleep. Basically, we need to carry on the fight. We must never, never give up, never accept that Britain has fallen, because if we do, then the sacrifices of all those who gave their lives would have been in vain. So I think it's important that people remember them words. If ye break faith, we shall not sleep. And no, we must never, ever stop believing we can turn this country around. Cheers, pal.
Carl, what a wonderful message, and that's a lovely quotation, and it echoes what Ant Middleton, who's a Marines hero, said on the show yesterday in a video, by the way, that's gone viral on YouTube. So do check it out. Just head to Talk on YouTube and you'll find that conversation with Ant Middleton. And I said to him, is the genie out of the bottle? Can it go back in? And is all hope lost? And he said, no, it's never too late to save the country. Is that true, Daniel in Epsom?
I think it is true, Mark. How are you this morning, sir?
I'm very well. Better for hearing your cheery voice. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Just making the kids breakfast. Off to work in a minute.
Aren't they lucky? Aren't they lucky? Isn't it amazing? As a grown adult, you can actually feed your kids breakfast. Who knew?
I know. It's one of these kind of newfandangled ideas. It's mad.
What are they having? Scrambled eggs? Cornflakes?
No, we have like the Hilton here. They've got fruit, they've got bacon, they've got pancakes, toast. They're spoilt, Mark.
Well, listen, I'll do you know what I'll do? I'll be over to Epsom for my brunch. Okay, so
mate, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, get the old bangers on. Listen, what do we think about the legacy of our war heroes and the future for this country?
Well, I just think that this Labour government are completely out of touch with what I call the views and wishes of the British majority. They don't. They're so entrenched in their naive ideology that they can't look outside of their kind of inner circle and notice what's happening in the country.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what's happening, right? We are all of us in Britain are about to witness the biggest political earthquake in UK political history. Okay. I guarantee not only are Reform ahead in the polls, but you've also got a phenomenon called what used to be called shy Conservatives, shy Tories. That's the same with the Reform Party as well. And I can tell you now, as someone who grew up working class in SE21, no dad, no money, I live with my grandparents. I'm a working class boy done well, right? And I can tell you now that the British majority out there are going to vote Reform. They're going to win the Welsh Senate first, okay? And then the Con Lab Uniparty are really going to start to brick it then. But I'm telling you now, we're all about to witness an absolutely massive phenomenon. Woke is dead, okay? We usually follow America a few years after. What's happened there, generally, they say America gets a cold and then Britain starts sneezing. And I can tell you now exactly what happened there is going to happen here. And I think, I've met Nigel a few times. I ran for UKIP in the past and the Conservative Party, much to my shame. And I can tell you now that we are going to see a massive and profound change for the better in this country. And I personally can't wait. They're going to win every small election right up until the general election. And the Con Lab Uniparty, this Labour Party, they're blinkered. Their ideology blinkers them to the harsh reality of what's going to happen. And I think that's great.
Well, Daniel, I think it sounds great too. My thought about Reform or any political party that's going to radically change the country and recalibrate our economy, restore the culture and traditions of this country, whoever does it, I don't care as long as it happens. What about the blob? It's my view that if Reform win, they're going to need a massive majority and probably 10 years in power.
I think one of the first things that you're going to have to do is bring some people in that are actually, at the moment, how government runs is you bring an MP in for a while and he does education, and then 2 years later he does transport, and then 2 years later he does health. He absolutely knows nothing about transport, health or education, okay? Which is why they need the civil service so much. I think what you do is instead, on borders and immigration, you bring someone in who knows what they're doing. Henry Bolton, someone who knows what they're talking about. Same with transport. And you have leaders and experts in their field running each government department, which I think Nigel is going to do, okay? Then you have expertise and knowledge at the top and a willingness to do things. And I think also, at the moment, there's a willingness not to change things. The blob and the left don't like things to change because they're currently running the show. Well, that's about to end.
Yeah.
And I think you go in there with the sword of Damocles hanging over every department, every quango, and you basically say from the outset, this is what the British majority want this, and if you don't deliver it for them... I mean, we've been voting against immigration, against mass immigration into Britain for about 30 years.
Correct.
And we've been ignored at every turn. Now, the government work for us. We pay their salaries to do the things at our behest that we wish. And what's happened is that both Conservative and Labour have made a terrible, terrible mistake. They thought that they were in charge, but they're not. We are in charge. We are the music makers. We are the dreamers of dreams. The country belongs to us. And we are no longer going to allow them to pee on our shoes, Mark, and tell us it's raining. Because we know the truth now, and there's a massive realignment coming down the track. They might not be able to see it yet, but it's coming.
Change is coming. Daniel, thank you for your call. Don't forget to get those rashes on and the scrambled eggs. I'll be round at 11. Can I ask David in Gloucestershire what he thinks? David, welcome to Talk Breakfast. What do you make of the state of modern Britain? Did our war heroes sacrifice so much for so little in return?
Well, they did, and I mean, it's absolutely awful. I mean, my family are all farming in either way, but I mean, they sacrificed, you know, they were all working in the background, you know, running the farms and feeding in it, you know, feeding the nation, you know, and when you see the country today, it's absolutely rotten to the core. But what really worries me, you know, well, there's two things really. Well, first of all, you know, talking this morning about the BBC, and they said, oh, they can't see outside of their ivory towers. Now, I'm blind and I live at home. But even don't they ever get shocked by news stories? Last week with the train, with those people in the train.
Yeah.
Yesterday, that poor lady that was stabbed in Birmingham.
Unprovoked.
You know, I mean, how awful is it? You know, prisoners escaping. You know, little girls that have been raped. And these people have just gone, oh, that's acceptable. And it's just like, where is your morals from the high-ups?
Well, that's right. The society is falling apart before our very eyes, isn't it, David? And yet the political class won't call it out and will gaslight us and tell us that everything is all rosy in the garden.
Yeah, but what I really rang about was, you know, with this whole policy, you know, I mean, obviously, like I said, I've got an agriculture background, you know, I mean, before my accident, I was working in farming.
Yeah.
You know, with this IHT, and I've got lots of friends and family, you know, that have worried hell us about this IHT, you know, and everything, and you just sort of think, right, well, that's going to make agriculture more expensive, food more expensive, and everything. And then you've got Ed Millipede running around going, oh, let's make energy more expensive. Well, who are the ones that actually suffer the most? The people they say go out to save, the poor.
Yes.
Because it's always the poor. I mean, I'm lucky. I've got a bit of money saved up, so I can afford to pay a little bit more for my energy, for my food. But the people who are on a fixed income, who are on people who are on benefits, generally, or people who have fallen through the gaps, they're the ones that, I mean, there must be people waking up. I mean, I've woken up this morning, it's a little bit cold, and I've gone, right, I can just flick the heating on, you know, lovely.
Yeah.
But there must be loads of poor pensioners and different people that have woken up, they go, oh, they're a bit cold. Well, oh well, gonna have to put up with it. You know, and it's just wrong. It's so wrong, and why can't these people in their ivory towers see that it's wrong?
Ivory Towers is right, David, and, you know, you're right to talk about the poor, because the left have completely abandoned the poor and the working class of this country, and all they care about is having 100 genders. For example, net zero, bad for the poor because it pushes up energy costs. Open borders, bad for the poor because it's creating competition for resources. And of course, a stagnant economy, bad for the poor because there is less pie to go around. You can't support those who need it the most. David, briefly, if you can, do you think change is coming? Do you agree with Daniel on that one?
Oh, it's definitely coming. I put up my flag about 3 months ago. I mean, it was quite funny. I got my carer to order me a flag, and then her half, he takes her deliveries from Amazon, and he said, who's ordered a flag? And she said, Who do you think?
Right.
Oh, okay.
It's that legend, David. David, I really enjoyed your company this morning. Please call me again soon. What a fantastic point you've made, a set of points. Danny is in the capital, London town. Danny, is it time to axe the hated TV tax? Is the licence fee still fit for purpose, do you think?
Well, in my opinion, it should be a pay-per-view channel. I'm not saying people shouldn't watch BBC, and if you want to watch BBC, you pay for it. And if you don't want to watch it, you don't pay for it. Why should I be forced to pay £174 a year and I never ever watch it? It's cruel. It's wrong. Sky. I watch Sky. I love Sky. I pay for it. But I don't watch the BBC. So why should pensioners have to pay for it when you don't even want to watch it? It's wrong.
And Danny, why don't you watch the BBC?
Because they're by it. I mean, I got to be honest, up to about a year ago, I used to watch it. But since I've watched your channel, and I got to be honest, I watched GB News, you and the other channel, you tell the truth. All the other ones are biased, like Israel. They hate Jewish people.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, they do. It's an absolute fact. When that bloke's banter on for 5 hours against the Israelis, and they showed it live, they hate the Jewish people. They hate us. And what they've done with Trump, they could have caused a war in America. They really could have caused a war there.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, Trump would be within his rights to tear up that trade deal after the behaviour of the BBC with that edited video on Panorama. And your point about anti-Semitism, I think, is fair. It was no less than the former director of television at the BBC, Danny Cohen, who has said the corporation is, and I quote, institutionally anti-Semitic.
Yeah, say it was against other faiths. Can you imagine what would happen?
Forget it. Good luck with that, Danny. They wouldn't last long. Danny, call me again soon. That was another fantastic call. Listen, book your place on the show, 03444991000. We're running a lot of topics at the same time. There is so much to get through. Don't forget, we're just half an hour away now from a very special Dolan's dispatch in which I'll be addressing whether or not our fallen heroes gave up an awful lot for a country that wasn't worth it. That's Dolan's dispatch at 8 o'clock in half an hour's time. I promise you won't want to miss it. But next up, let's get the reflections on Remembrance Sunday from a politician and former military hero who's got a few uncomfortable truths for our political establishment. That's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Andrew Neil says that Keir Starmer is on borrowed time. And we've got a message from Warren here. Warren in Hull says, let's hope that Andrew Neil's right. Starmer and his inept, dodgy cabinet is gone with him. I'm leaving the country next year. Can't take any more living from hand to mouth while others are given everything while having given nothing themselves. I'm fed up of having to take a loan out to do the weekly shop. Warren, thank you for that. My heart goes out to you for your situation. Stuart says, good morning, Mark. Great show. Keep saying it how it is, please, because that's why I watch Talk. Sarah says, Sarah's in Plymouth. She says, good morning, Mark. The BBC showed The Darkest Hour film last night. I hope Starmer was watching with someone able to talk him through it. Neil says, great show. I pay the licence fee through gritted teeth so I can watch live TV. No other reason. Given the choice, I would not pay for the BBC. And Andrew says, good morning, Mark. I own a steelwork company. This net zero exercise is pushing us out of business. Prince William should maybe walk a mile in my shoes and refrain from spouting off with his privileged advice. Is he so divorced from reality? Well, we're going to discuss that after 8 o'clock, Andrew. Should the Prince of Wales, Prince William, stay out of the net zero debate? We'll discuss that with my studio guests, and it's an important conversation. Did you know that the NHS has spent £1.3 billion of your money on net zero, and they've achieved zero reduction in emissions? You couldn't make it up. I'll get to more of your messages shortly, but did our fallen heroes sacrifice so much in vain? Let's get the views now of former army officer and the ex-leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton, OBE. Good morning, Henry.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning.
You've got an excellent military CV. You served in the British Army, attaining the rank of Lance Corporal. You went on to reach the rank of Captain, didn't you, following your transfer from the Territorial Army?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
So quite the career. Why did you decide to serve in the military?
I don't really know, Mark, ultimately. There's something that happened very early on in my childhood, which I think both my parents would say that influenced me. But I've always, and this sounds, it's almost embarrassing to say it, but because people will take it wrongly. But I've always, whenever I've seen somebody prepared to do harm, I've always been prepared to stand in front of them and protect those to whom they would do that harm. And that's been intrinsic to everything I've done, whether it's been in the military, then later in the police, or in politics, and in my civilian work for the United Nations and so on. That's always been my rationale. There are people in this world to whom harm would be done if good people didn't stand up and say no, and put themselves on the line to do that. And at the moment, we've got tens of thousands of people working in our armed forces, doing this day in and day out, particularly in places like Estonia at the moment. So that's really where it comes from within me. But I think it's you don't think about that every day. It's more of a sort of personal ethos that sort of is in the background.
Well, listen, I credit you. I always salute anyone that has served in the military, Henry, and it's a credit to you that you always seek to stand in harm's way. And that's, I've known you for a long time, and that is your nature. Not everyone's like that, of course. Do you think that those who sacrificed so much did so in vain, given the state of the country in 2025?
Well, I think we're losing it. I think we're losing the meaning of remembrance. And I'm of an age, Mark, where I remember the First World War generation, and my favourite sort of member of that generation was my great uncle, who had won the Military Cross and Bar in France, and then he won the Bar in Italy in World War One. He was in the thick of it, the only officer in his battalion to survive from the beginning to the end. Now, he would not have done a single thing differently, and for him, this remembrance was it wasn't about remembering the horrors of war. It was about remembering that Britain proudly stood up, and those people, those men and those women, and they stood up to face evil. And they fought. There's Edmund, a guy called Edmonds. I don't remember his other name. Wrote a passage that is on many war memorials, and it said, "Went the day well, we died and never knew, but well or ill, freedom, we died for you." Now that's the thing. There was a pride in that, and it was also a day to remember those friends and colleagues who'd suffered and lost their lives. And we've moved on, and it seems to me that in this modern world, it has become almost it is being portrayed as a celebration of war. And that worries me deeply, because in doing that, we are losing the point that actually people can live in peace because we are strong in standing against evil. And I think we're losing that bit of it. And as a result, we've got governments and politicians, open borders. I mean, we've got a government here who is doing nothing effective in terms of preventing our culture being undermined and displaced. We've given away British territory, or in the process of giving it away. We are pursuing Northern Ireland veterans for supposed crimes in Northern Ireland, when actually it's a two-tier system again. We're not going after the IRA. Tell me where in the actions of the modern political class we are seeing a reflection of what these men and women gave and why they gave it in World War I, World War II, and conflicts across ever since World War I. I don't see it, and that worries me. And I don't see our children being educated in those sort of ethics. I just don't understand it.
No, and those men and women fought so bravely to protect the territorial boundaries of this country,
Correct.
Something that we are willingly and proactively failing to do in 2025 with the boat crossings and with legal net migration.
So much of what they stood for, those previous generations, that actually safeguarded this nation, and modern generations don't seem to appreciate it, that the freedoms that they enjoy are because good men and women stood up to evil. And I fear that, as I say, the modern generation just isn't being taught that. And in this woke environment, it's all about the horror of war. Do not lecture a soldier who has been on military operations and seen warfare up close and raw on the horrors of war. I have seen it to an extent that nobody wants to even imagine. So I say to these people, don't lecture me on the horrors of war. I know only too well what the horrors of war are, and that is why we need to be strong in facing those who would try to remove our freedoms.
And absolutely, Henry, and I'm humbled to hear what you've got to say, and I won't say a word while you're saying it, because anyone that hasn't served in the military is not in a position to comment, and we really are not worthy for the contribution you've made and those who have sacrificed so much, including Alec Penstone, Henry, who has become a global sensation. He was a hero during the war. He's a hero again for rather spoiling the party over at ITV on Good Morning Britain by being pretty honest about whether or not that sacrifice was worthy of so much bloodshed. Take a listen to this clip from Good Morning Britain that's gone viral.
My message is, I can see in my mind's eye there was rows and rows of white stones of all the hundreds of my friends and everybody else that gave their lives for what? The country of today. No, I'm sorry. The sacrifice wasn't worth the result that it is now.
We won't take any lectures from the progressive leftist lanyard class, will we, Rupert? But we will sit and listen respectfully to the remarks of Alec Penstone there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look, I think that says it all, doesn't it? There is one of the few representatives of that generation, and that man, that white beret, represents, people might not know it, but he's a member of the Arctic Convoys Association. So he was on the ships traveling through the Arctic to actually supply Russia, so that Russia could fight the Germans on their front. But he is one of the few representatives. I think only 20 World War II veterans will be able to march past the cenotaph today. So there are very few. So we should listen to his words, Mark. And he and his generation are being betrayed. That's the only word. Sorry. It breaks my heart that this country and some of its servicemen, not just them, but a lot of civilians as well, the fire service, the police back here in the Blitz and so on, they gave their lives, they put their lives on the line so that people could live in a decent, free way, and all we're seeing is that being undermined by our leadership at the moment. It's difficult because I think we have got people, frankly, in politics who are inadequate in that sense. They just simply don't understand that you can't live in a free, democratic society unless you protect it. And these men and women understood that. And they were prepared to lay down their lives for it. And yet what we see is a self-serving political elite. There are good politicians out there, of course there are. But in general, we see a self-serving political elite, which is kowtowing to a woke liberal movement that simply does not understand any of this. And frankly, I don't think a single one of them would put their lives on the line to protect other people.
Henry, I can hear the emotion in your voice. This is really, really painful, isn't it?
It is. I mean, you know, I luckily have not. I've never been injured in combat. I've seen people killed. I've had a person standing next to me shot through the head. But I myself have not suffered sort of physically, if you like. Having seen all that, having seen how what happens when you lower your guard, what happens when you start to forget the lessons that centuries have taught us, is that you then become vulnerable. And it's not just about the sacrifice being wasted. And I agree with Ant Middleton, it's not been wasted yet, there's still time to change it. Yeah. But it's also about those things that we've tried to protect are at risk. It's not just about the servicemen and servicewomen, it's our entire way of life that is being put at risk by a failure to recognise those lessons. And it's those lessons that people died for. That's where we get the lesson. And we need to recognise that. No, it's terribly sad, Mark, and I hope that something happens somebody wakes up somewhere with sufficient gravitas and leadership, a person who can actually put themselves forward and say to the nation, look, we need to recognise who we are, where we came from, and be proud of that. And we need to learn the lessons from it. And we need to protect what we've got, because not only because people made sacrifice, but because of the reason they made the sacrifice. And I don't know, Mark, I'm sort of waffling a bit now, but
you're not waffling.
So you're showing the Guards at the moment, the Guards band, the combined bands of the Guards regiments there. I mean, those men and women are still serving on the front line effectively. We've got troops in Estonia who are safe. The Estonian government asked for us to go over there, for NATO to go over there, and to help bolster their own defences, because they don't have the resources to do so. Now that is in the cause of freedom, and you know, God willing, they will never see combat, but they are there ready to do so, to stand up to any aggressor and say, no, you will not pass, because there are people behind us who need to be protected, and we will protect them with our lives if need be. Now, that's a powerful thing. It's a powerful message, and it's one that our politicians should respect.
Henry, I'm humbled to have had this conversation with you today, and we, speaking on behalf of my viewers and listeners, we salute the efforts of anybody that served in the military, and anybody like yourself and the many thousands of others who have stepped in harm's way and stood in harm's way on our behalf. I just want to say what an important conversation it's been, and it couldn't be more appropriate on Remembrance Sunday. So, Henry, keep fighting the fight, and there are plenty of people listening and watching who back you all the way. Henry Bolton, former Army officer and, of course, former ex-leader of UKIP and an OBE, Henry Bolton. I think you could hear a pin drop, couldn't you, as Henry spoke with such emotion. Next up, did those who gave their lives do so in vain? And I want to talk about Prince William, because he's made a speech about net zero. Does the Prince of Wales need to butt out of politics? We'll discuss that next.
I mean, it is really heartbreaking to see, you know, a gentleman like that when he's talking and reflecting back on his military service and what that means for him now. Of course, it's incredibly moving. You know, I'm a veteran myself. I served in Afghanistan. And when I heard him speaking, I think it really sort of made me reflect on my own service in Afghanistan. And also, I was kind of thinking, obviously, he spoke a little bit about why he has the feelings that he does now. But I was also just reflecting on what kind of things made me feel the same way as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
We're having a big conversation about politics and about what happens if Reform win the next election. Will they tackle the blob successfully? Morning, Mark, says Steph. If Nigel Farage does become our next PM, he will need to break down the blob and get small and medium-sized enterprises to break the current system and get rid of Blair's ruinous policies that still dictate policy today. And good morning, Mark, says Michelle. Honestly, I don't see Starmer lasting until 2027. Time to get Nigel in and shake things up. Oh, and I haven't paid my TV licence in 10 years. I don't miss the BBC. It's Talk TV for me all the way. Well, Michelle, thank you for that. Now, earlier, I got a furious text message from Andrew who said, Mark, I own a steelworks company and this net zero exercise is putting us out of business. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, should walk a mile in my shoes and refrain from spouting off with his privileged advice. Is he so divorced from reality? I've got calls of that nature too, saying that the Prince of Wales should stay out of politics. Let's get reaction from Talk's royal correspondent, Rupert Bell. Good morning, Rupert.
Good morning, Mark.
Now, clearly, Rupert, we want to clean up the planet. No one enjoys pollution and we must preserve the earth that was bestowed upon us. But it's a very fine line, isn't it, between a caring message about the environment and party politics?
Yes, and the royal family have to make sure they don't seem to be adopting a political line. They've got to be apolitical. Now, the king, he was always quite strong before he ascended to the throne on his views about the environment, but now he's been much more circumspect with what he says. But for William, it's going to be something he's going to have to contend with when he does become king. How does he avoid getting himself in political hot water, whatever your view? Now, we know he's passionate about the environment, and obviously he's been down at COP in Brazil and also his Earthshot Prize, and it is something he's got to make sure. How does he, excuse me,
bless you,
navigate through these difficult waters for him? Because he is passionate about it, but it is something that could find himself basically alienating himself from great swathes of the population if he goes too far one way. So that's something he's got to think about going forward. So it is a very difficult one. At the moment, he probably is able to just about get away with it, but it is something he's going to have to think further down the line. What does he do now to make sure that he doesn't upset people and take a political view on things?
Well, that's right, because like I say, we can all agree, can't we? You and I, Rupert, my viewers and listeners, that we should protect the environment. But if you go all out with net zero, that has implications for the lives of ordinary people, whether it's energy bills or needing a heat pump boiler or an electric car, you know, and that's where it enters the realm of politics. And it's difficult to take lectures from someone that lives in a multi-room mansion or indeed castle.
Well, and this is the point for him. He is passionate about it, and we've seen what he's done with Earthshot, and no one's probably saying these are bad initiatives.
Sure.
But it's where it goes, does he go too far? Now, net zero is controversial. End of. We know. You know, Talk TV listeners have would in the main prove how controversial it is. And so something has, for the Prince William, he is going to have to think very hard how far he goes with this issue. Yes, he wants to support Earthshot and environmental issues, and he says he wants to, like everyone, leave the planet in a better place for his children and grandchildren. No one's saying that that's a bad thing to be doing. But where does he draw the line about when does he enter the realms of politics? And bearing in mind you had Keir Starmer alongside him, so it does have a very political feel about it. So that is something that he's going to have to watch going forward.
Is he doing his father's bidding? Because we know that the king has stepped away from the net zero debate, given that he's now our monarch. So is he doing this on behalf of his king and possibly trying to, on behalf of the king, is he trying to please his father with this activism?
I think he was there representing the king at the COP conference. So in a way, you could say perhaps he is. But I think this is deep felt. So, and it is something, if you look, Prince Philip was passionate about what set up the World Wildlife Fund. You then, excuse me,
bless you.
You then had the king as well, very much in favour of environmental issues, but has taken a back step there. And last night was obviously at the service of remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall. So you actually know that it is something the family are interested in about and feel that they can do some good and use their voice to help these issues. But there is this fine line. When does he enter the realm of politics? And of course, we saw pictures of him with Keir Starmer, and that again shows, well, there's a political message to what's going on down in Brazil.
Most definitely. He will learn on the job. Do you feel now that the Andrew story is starting to sort of recede a little bit, and the King and the Prince of Wales, Princess of Wales and other senior royals can now get on with the job again?
I'm not sure that is the case. I really don't. I think, you know, there are obviously talk of parliamentary discussions this week about Andrew's conduct and his financial situation. Obviously, you've had the Congress asking for him to come forward as a witness. Will he? We'll know on November the 20th. So this Andrew story isn't going away, but obviously they want it to try and be deflected, and that's why they got rid of his titles. But I don't think it's going away yet. There's still a lot of water to go under that bridge, and the royal family are probably not going to get away scot-free, as it were, in terms of the headlines, because Andrew is a problem that they won't go away as far as I'm concerned.
Rupert, lovely to see you. Always enjoy having you on the show. We'll catch up soon. Rupert Bell is Talk's royal correspondent. What do you think about that? Should Prince William butt out of politics? What are your thoughts about his pronouncements on net zero, given the fact that he lives in multi-bedroomed palaces? 0344 499 1000. But next up on Remembrance Sunday, a very special Dolan's dispatch. It might get me cancelled. Good. That's next.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the Channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually, where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants, and as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here, with very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. It is 3 minutes past 8 and it is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan. A busy show coming up on this Remembrance Sunday. Why is this day so important? Well, that's the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch in just a moment's time. I'll also put that question to former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe. Meanwhile, breaking this morning, Labour MPs call on the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood to soften her migration plans. That's right, to soften her immigration plans. Will bring you more on this growing political row, which could see numbers coming into the country explode rather than shrink. Plus, Labour MPs don't want to cut spending, but are now telling the government not to raise taxes either. An all-out war is clearly breaking out within the Labour Party. How long has Keir Starmer got? And the BBC bias row rages on, with Donald Trump threatening revenge on our national state broadcaster, the BBC. Is it time now to axe the hated licence fee? Plus, the Prince of Wales, Prince William, has sparked controversy with a speech about climate change. Should he stay out of politics? Should he butt out of the net zero debate? My priority for the next 2 hours is to get your opinions on the national television and radio airwaves. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222, or leave a voice note. And as the saying goes, let's talk. But, as always, at this time on Talk Breakfast, it is time for Dolan's Dispatch. Our obligation once a year on Remembrance Sunday is to do just that, to remember. To remember the sacrifice, to remember the pain, the blood, the sweat, the tears. To remember the guns, the bullets, the tanks, the Spitfires, the bombers. To remember the trenches, the smoke, the gunfire, the explosions. To remember the injuries, the whiplash, the PTSD, the lost limbs, the burnt skin, the shell shock. To remember the almost unprecedented scale of human courage, of human suffering, and of death. Our extraordinary heroes did that twice in 2 world wars, on both occasions facing down the fascism of Germany. So on the sacred occasion of Remembrance Sunday, we do just that. We remember, we honour, we reflect, we pray, we thank, and we make a sworn promise never to forget. And that golden generation who served so bravely in the Second World War, as they slowly fade away, as the last few soldiers are no longer with us, it's up to us in the future to lay the wreaths, to pay the respects, and to cherish their legacy. But in this digital age of multimedia, of clicks, of posts, of trending topics and viral videos, it fell to a 100-year-old veteran who likely doesn't use a mobile phone and who certainly isn't on TikTok to remind all of us what they were fighting for. And in an incredibly powerful interview on Good Morning Britain on ITV, the brave Alec Penstone shocked his two rather patronising interviewers, Kate Garraway and the Sharia law-loving Adil Ray, by spoiling the party and declaring that, in fact, the sacrifice was not worth it. Take a listen.
My message is, I can see in my mind's eye there was rows and rows of white stones of all the hundreds of my friends and everybody else that gave their lives for what? The country of today. No, I'm sorry. The sacrifice wasn't worth the result.
What a clip. Now, they tried to talk down to him. This man is 100 years of age with his faculties. He's a very bright man and a very brave man. They treated him like a 5-year-old. And what he was doing is he was speaking inconvenient truths that didn't fit their woke, progressive narrative. Kate Garraway hated it. Adil Ray hated it. In my view, they tried to take over the conversation. But the good news is they failed. Now, of course, in the literal sense, he's not right that the war wasn't worth it. Of course, the war was worth it. The defeat of Hitler was an existential moment for Britain and the free world. But that's not what Alec meant. That's not what he was saying. This very wise man, who's been on the planet for a century and was a teenager when he joined the war effort, was reflecting on the sorry state of Britain in 2025. Not a country that he recognises, that he voted for, that he fought for. Antisocial behaviour is what he was talking about. Machete-wielding thugs patrolling the streets, in shopping centres and on public transport. Youths leaping over ticket barriers at train stations. Women and girls not safe to walk home after a party. That's what he was talking about. A feckless and entitled society. 10 million working-age people not active in the economy. Sat at home, getting baked on weed, watching daytime telly, drinking their own body weight in Diet Coke and eating their own body weight in Domino's Pizza. What this man, Alec, was talking about is feckless public sector workers off sick for months on end, with stress apparently. He was talking about wokery in our schools, with activist teachers telling kids that global warming means the earth will have blown up by next Tuesday, that Britain's history is wicked and shameful, and asking 5-year-olds in primary school if they're a boy or a girl today. He's talking about the sick scourge of leftism, of authoritarian socialism, which of course we saw during the COVID pandemic with masking, lockdowns and vaccine tyranny, and which is now part of our daily lives, the kind of authoritarianism that this brave man Alec and his colleagues were fighting in the Second World War. Alec wonders why he fought for a country that recklessly lives beyond its means, with a bloated welfare state propping up an idle generation of wasters who think they're owed something by the world. That's what Alec was talking about. Families on generous benefits who can't even put a breakfast in their kids' stomachs before they go to school. Poor families on much less money used to do that without a problem. Now, today we celebrate the courage of our fallen military heroes, but we should be proud not just of them, but of the country that they leave behind. And how can we be proud of Britain in 2025? How is that possible? An absurdly inefficient and wasteful health service that it's revealed this week has spent £1.3 billion on net zero measures, including making ambulances electric, even though they don't go very far before running out of juice, and giving patients overpriced, environmentally friendly medication, And with that enormous cost that should have gone into operations and treatment, they've produced 0 reductions in emissions. How can we be proud of a country which is no longer a community, with millions now living a parallel existence, speaking another language, living by different customs, and often following different laws? The ITV presenter Adil Ray in that clip, who in my view tried to goad Alec into saying something racist, would quite like a bit of Sharia law knitting it into the country and its constitution. Well, I wonder whether that's what our brave fighter pilots hoped for when they climbed into the cockpit of a Spitfire to face down German planes in the sky. I'm sure that living in a religious theocracy was exactly the vision they had for Britain in the 21st century. It's quite amazing, it's quite spectacular that a brave war hero is a hero again at the age of 100 in order to show us what we have become, to shame us on this day of pride. It's not working, folks. We need an entirely different kind of country, not this failed experiment in open borders and multiculturalism. We have a multi-ethnic society, no problem, and we used to have productive, well-integrated, manageable and sensible levels of immigration. That must return. And our society must become British again, whatever your colour or religion. Unified, harmonious, hard-working, we must become one country again, one community, one set of values, one way of life, one set of laws, wrapped around British tradition, British history, the British flag, the British way of life. We must reassert all of that and fast, because what we had is fast disappearing as a result of cultural ghettos and no-go zones that are not just at odds with, but as we saw during those weekly so-called peace marches, potentially at war with what Britain is about. Because if you allow extremists to walk the streets of our great cities shouting, "Globalise the Intifada," which means bombs in shopping centres and on public transport, then what you have is the basis of sectarian violence and, may God forbid, a civil war in this country. That's why the protection of Jews is so important, and why anti-Semitism is such a worrying symptom of our damaged society and a worrying portent for the future. Anti-Semitism was the basis of Hitler's Germany. But now, thanks to lax border controls, both legal and illegal, we've imported anti-Semitism from overseas, now encouraged by the middle-class, university-educated, be-kind, useful idiots waving banners on those marches. Jewish people have always been, and always will be, the canary in the coal mine. History has taught us that if they're not safe, we are not safe either. And the hateful ideologies that we previously battled on the continent are now on our shores. These ideologies, in the heads of British-born people, are a big problem for the future. So the battle for freedom, for Western values, must now be fought at home as well as abroad. And there was us thinking that our generation would get out without having a war. Good luck with that. The battle for freedom never ends. And the battle against authoritarianism and toxic leftism, masked as kindness and empathy, will never end either. Now, I'm grateful to Alec for his courage and sacrifice in the Second World War. And I'm even more grateful at his intervention at this late stage in his life. He dropped one last bomb on the enemy. You can't listen to this man and not realise that things have to change, and drastically. That the country that he fought for must be reclaimed. That the values he fought for must be restored. His fight is now our fight. Peacefully, of course, Panorama, in case you're watching, and through the ballot box. It is time to take our country back and make Britain, Britain again. Your reaction, 0344 499 1000. Claire is in Middlesbrough. Good morning, Claire. Welcome to Talk Breakfast.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. What are your thoughts about the remarks of this veteran and the state of the country?
I thought he was wonderful. I watched it live because I am a fan of Good Morning Britain. I think Kate was just trying to say, oh, gosh, I'm so sorry you feel that way. I'm really shocked to hear that Adil Ray has these thoughts about Sharia law. That has completely shocked me. But, do you know, I think you all should say thank you right now, because you wouldn't be on this programme, neither would I, unless all of my... I lost 4 great-grand uncles, several members in the war, and my family right now are standing behind Admiralty Arch, which I believe is off of Pall Mall.
Yes.
I was taken as a baby in arms, and we were made to go. And sometimes as a teenager, I didn't want to go, but we were made to go every Remembrance Sunday to pay our respects. And my family still do that. My father's he's in his 80s. My mother is in her late 70s. My sister and her children and her grandchildren will be there. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. It makes you feel very British, makes you understand why we have freedom of speech and why this country is such a beautiful country. I'm sorry, I'm a bit emotional. I'm disabled, so I can't be there right now. And I'm frightened as a woman. I can't go on the streets late at night, walk home from work without feeling unsafe. I don't claim any benefits. I am disabled. I'm fortunate enough to work from home. We can make our country proud again, but I do believe we're heading for some sort of civil war. And I don't mean fighting on the streets as such, but I mean fighting our consciences, fighting in our hearts, and fighting for what is right. And we have to fix our country. I believe in the NHS. I believe in the civil service, because the majority of civil servants are hard-working people who try to do their best every day.
Well, they do. And Claire, there are many great things about this country, of course. And as Ant Middleton said on the show yesterday, it's never too late to make Britain Britain again. But that is the challenge going forward, isn't it?
Well, yeah. And if it has to be Farage, okay, I don't agree with everything he says, but I do believe he is a strong leader. He is strong, and he'll say no, and he'll tell us there's tough times ahead. You know, and I think of my grandmother, who said some of us enjoyed the war, and she didn't mean that in a weird way. She said we all knew what we were fighting against. We were all on rations, all of us. We wore the same clothes because you had to make do, as they said in those days. Don't, you know, mend and make do. They had a common cause, and it was for us, for you and I to speak like this freely.
And you're absolutely right. Without their sacrifice, Claire, we wouldn't be having this conversation on the national airwaves. Claire, really enjoyed your company this morning. I look forward to speaking again soon. Claire in Middlesbrough there, who is absolutely right to say that there are many positives to this country. All is not lost, of course not. But the fight begins now, and that's why that video from that veteran was so important, because he dropped one last bomb. It was a truth bomb, and it's about the fact that this isn't working, and we need change, and we need to reclaim what this country is about. Let me know if you agree or disagree. 0344 499 1000. Did our war heroes die in vain? We'll debate that next.
BBC in crisis with this dossier?
Where do you start? I mean, is it in crisis? I mean, there seems to be a crisis every week. And what we're talking about here is somebody who has an opinion, which whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, is still an opinion. And some of the things that are being said do have to be investigated.
But it's not an opinion to point out that video of Donald Trump was edited.
No, it's an opinion. It's an opinion because obviously it's editing. You edit everything. The fact of the matter is, you make a decision as to whether or not you feel it's actually still reflective of the overall key message.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, lots of you were very moved by several moments in the show, including an interview that I did with Henry Bolton, MBE, who is a former army officer and the ex-leader of UKIP. And Ian in Cambridgeshire has said, "Good morning, Mark. I just listened to Henry Bolton. He speaks for me, every word, every emotion. I too was in the Territorial Army for 6 years. I didn't see action, but when we passed out, we were told we were there to defend those who can't defend themselves. I will be at a parade today representing the 4th generation of military service in our family. Thank you to all of you guys at Talk. Regards, Ian in Cambridgeshire." Thank you for that. What a truly honourable statement from Henry Bolton, says Michael. Utmost respect for him for saying what he said. My grandparents sacrificed everything for this country just so I'm able to text this show. Lest we forget is rapidly becoming we must forget. I never will. Heroes, every last one of them. That's Michael in Suffolk. Trevor in Stevenage, good morning, Mark. Fantastic and truly emotional show this morning, and so much passion from your contributors. Whilst I agree with everything being said, I have a question for you. How do we change things? It's good to talk and complain, but what can we actually do to change things materially? I hope you understand my question, and thank you for bringing this subject up. Well, Trevor, I'll do that in the company of my excellent guests in the studio today, who are political strategist Peter Barnes and political commentator Mike Indian. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Mike, why is Remembrance Sunday important?
It's important, I think, because, as I said, is a day the greatest generation are moving beyond our lived experience now, Mark. And, you know, gentlemen like Alec who've spoken this week, that kind of oral history, that kind of lived experience is something that we must remember, because given the change that's occurred in that time, but also the kind of challenge that's been posed to the kind of order that was established in the wake of the victory that they won in 1945, is incredibly important. But also it has to apply to all wars that British soldiers have been deployed to as well, you know, everything that's happened since then, Korea being another example of where we don't tend to remember the contributions as well. But anyone who puts on a uniform and serves the country is doing, you know, an incredible service for us all. And especially for today's service personnel, they're operating in a more uncertain world where they're having to compete with threats that weren't even conceived as possible back in 1945.
And Peter, has that viral video from Alec Penstone helped or hindered the national conversation?
That's a good question, because I actually think it's hindered it. Because for me, Remembrance Sunday is about two things. It's actually about pay up our debt. We owe things. It's not, Remembrance Sunday for me is also about resilience. It's to remember that actually the reason it's a poppy is that it was the only flower that could grow on the battlefields after the major because of all the damage done. And it's to show that a delicate thing could grow in a very dangerous and kind of blood-soaked land. And that's the point of the poppy. And I think these are the two things we have to remember. I think we've gone down this avenue of just, oh, isn't everything terrible? And oh my God, it's all awful and everything's collapsing and all the rest of it. The point of it is to remember the resilience that came not just from the soldiers, but from people back at home. The war effort, they got that kind of national pride, unity coming together to actually get through it. You know, like we always talk about the home front and you know, that all that narrative, and it's very real, the British spirit, because you have to remember that in just before the Second World War, the same narratives we hear about under-resourced, the people won't want to fight for the nation, all that was actually the public narrative just before the war. So we're living in the same time, and that's my problem with this interview, is the way that it's being interpreted by people who have the right intentions, but I do think we're kind of forgetting the kind of crucial bit of do something, which I agree with the message you read out. It's about the material things. It's paying that debt in ways that are very easy to do. For example, the military covenant should be law. Like, you know, there's no reason that a veteran's medical records could get lost. Just send them from the army to the NHS. It's not difficult to do, but that is a major problem. We talk about homelessness. We saw over COVID how easy it was when we put money behind things to get people off the streets. We've shown we can do it, so why aren't we doing it? Why are you know, people like the Chelsea pensioners begging for pennies when it's our debt that we owe? I find it grotesque in a way, actually. The one thing I don't like about it is actually the reality of the fact that we all like to run around with our poppies and say the right things, but the minute it gets to tomorrow, everybody disappears. There's no follow through, and we've got to change that. That's how you change the country. Follow through on something.
Well, that's right, because otherwise the legacy of the war dead has been squandered. Are we in danger of doing that, Derek, forgetting the contribution of those who fell on our behalf?
Oh, you're no kidding. What Alex said on what was it, Good Morning Britain, whatever it was, was absolutely spot on. I mean, if you could imagine trying to bring, say, an aircraft crew back from 1945 and them suddenly being washed up on the shore today, can you imagine the horror that they would find? Because you know, if they thought they'd gone out last night to do a bombing raid and come back this morning and they couldn't even get a bed in a hotel because it was full of migrants, you know, they were sold the lie that they were going out of this country to keep our borders safe. They were told that we were about to be invaded by other Europeans. You know, so what the hell would they think now if they come back?
Well, Derek, stay with us and let me put that to Mike Indian, because the boats crisis in the Channel makes a mockery of those who served in the military in 2 world wars, doesn't it?
I don't think it does. I think actually it's very much a modern crisis as well. I think it's basically, if anything, it's a mockery of the fact that governments have successively reduced spending on border security, and we now have to look to the military to police and stuff. That is not the role of the military. That should be the role of a well-funded civilian police.
I don't think any amount of border investment would stop the boats, because when they arrive here, they're our problem.
I think there
Once they're in the sea,
I've said this before, Mark. I think there are problems before they get into the sea as well, because the issue starts thousands of miles away as well. The issue is not the moment they set, you know, into British territorial waters, or even when they arrive in France. It starts long before then. We need to be stopping the flow of migration coming through. If people are being pushed out of their countries for legitimate reasons and wish to assume safety, that's one factor. But if we are concerned about people coming over here on boats to try and avoid our asylum system, to try and avoid our migration system, then we need to be looking at the countries of origin that they are coming from and why.
Isn't that the Keir Starmer smash the gangs route, which has only seen numbers grow?
Well, I don't think that the Prime Minister's slogan had much behind it at the start. I think that we need to judge him at the end of his 5-year term as well. We have seen, you know, record levels of small boat crossings too, but it's one small part of what we've seen of record high net migration as well. And part of that's been driven by increases in international student numbers, part of that's been driven by economic migrants, part of that was also driven by political refugees from Ukraine and Hong Kong coming over here as well, which we wanted to help these people. These were countries which we felt a connection with and a route and wanted to provide political safe haven. That is a legitimate route for asylum seekers to come here, I would say.
OK, Derek, you get the last word on this. Do you think that the boats crisis makes a mockery of our war dead?
It makes an absolute mockery of it. I mean, come on. I mean, your Labour chap there, the Labour government, any government, could have ended this many, many years ago, and all they had to do was say, right, you do not get money when you come to this country. You do not get a hotel to stay in. You stay in a camp until we deport you. And they would have stopped the crisis in a day. Simple as that. You know, these people are idiots. They're absolute parasites, and they're living off the back of those people that died in 2 world wars.
Derek, thank you for your call and important contribution to the conversation. Do call me again soon, 03444 991 1000. So much more to get through. But next up, as Donald Trump rages about BBC bias, is it time to axe the hated licence fee? That's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
There's trouble in paradise, folks. The BBC in hot water. The Sunday Telegraph revealed they are going to say sorry for doctored Trump's speech. The BBC will apologise for the misleading editing of a Donald Trump speech in a Panorama documentary. According to the Telegraph, Samir Shah, the BBC's chairman, will write to the Culture, Media and Sport Committee tomorrow to express regret for the way the speech made on the day of the January the 6th Capitol riot was spliced together. And of course, this Peter Barnes follows a lot of allegations around the BBC and impartiality or bias, including a leaked memo from someone that was advising the BBC about editorial standards, who said that they've been pushing pro-trans narratives, silencing the voices of gender-critical feminists, rewriting British history and ignoring the concerns of 30 Oxbridge professors who have said this is woke gone mad, and with the BBC Arabic service that has considered to be pro-Hamas in its coverage. So it's been a rough week for the BBC.
I think a rough week. I think it's been a rough, 4 or 5 years, really, of this stuff. I mean, the issue with the trans stuff, that was a story about 2 years ago, actually, when actually a load of journalists in the LGBT department, which I don't understand why that's a thing, suddenly decided they were going to up and walk out, and because they didn't want to cover the kind of the gender-critical side of the argument. They said they refused to do it. And it was the head of news, Deborah Turner, I think, who actually had to convince them that that was their job. We have a state broadcaster who doesn't understand what a journalist is. That this is the big problem. And more importantly, it's great writing a letter. Who's getting fired? This was a deliberate act. Who's being held accountable for it? Who? How many times do we keep having these instances in the public sector of major mismanagement, actual deliberate tampering of stuff, and nobody seems to get fired?
Well,
it's
that's
ridiculous.
Right, because what we're hearing from some, including Roger Bolton on the show yesterday, who's a former BBC executive and presenter, Mike, and he said this was a mistake, it was an oversight. Well, it wasn't. This edit was deliberate because it removed the part where Donald Trump said that you must go to the Capitol peacefully and patriotically. Not just that, but as a former BBC presenter earlier in the show said to me at about 7:15 in the morning, Sally Jones, she pointed out, with her knowledge of how you make TV shows, that they used footage to cover the edit point. So it really was misinformation.
There was a couple of things about this that I find deeply frustrating. Firstly, again, the BBC is having to apologise for something, and at a time in which we want to have trusted media sources. If we're going to ask people to put their hand in their pocket and fund the BBC, they need to feel that they can trust the news they get from that. Secondly, that this Panorama programme wasn't produced in-house, it was produced by an outside production company. The BBC, if we're not funding the BBC to do news and current affairs, then what on earth are we funding it for? Why are they paying money to outside production
we
companies?
do, because the licence fee money is a budget that's available to the BBC, and then they can outsource.
But I think that should be used for BBC journalists in-house, because that then produces more accountability.
Trying to get the BBC off the hook here. What about those? What about those bosses at the BBC, the commissioning editors?
No,
who
the
swan
BBC,
around?
the BBC commissioned this. They had final say on the programme, and they did not do their editorial due diligence on this.
Bingo. We got there in the end, Mike.
Yeah. Can I cut in there? There seems to be a pattern of that, though, because didn't we have the same situation where they accidentally used a child who was the son of a Hamas agriculture minister to be the face of this kind of anti-Israel massive piece of propaganda?
There was a Hamas agriculture minister.
Well, neither did I till this documentary, but apparently
are they
that
taxing
was
the farmers
again
as well?
An outside company. It was an outside production company. It seems to me that they're kind of outsourcing, and then when it comes in-house, they're going, oh, well, that's fine. There's no standards. There's no kind of integrity to the BBC.
But also, the outsourcing is a complete red herring. I mean, that was introduced by Mrs. Thatcher in the 80s, which was allowing basically forcing the BBC to use outside companies, which has generated a lot of jobs and national income.
Now I think it's actually about not being held responsible if something goes wrong, because we didn't make it.
Well,
that's
this is what I want to get to, and I'm going to speak to Mary in just a second, but here's my point about the world of TV that I've inhabited, for better or worse, for 25 years, which is that you still have commissioning editors at the BBC who are on six-figure salaries, swanning around in 5,000 quid Armani suits, right? Absolutely high as a kite on the Colombian marching powder, long liquid lunches at Soho House. And their job on that fat salary is to watch the programme that they've commissioned before it's broadcast. Otherwise, why do we pay them £300,000, £400,000, £500,000 a year? I'll tell you someone that should get $500,000 a year is Mary in Hemel Hempstead, who's the voice of reason on Talk. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Mark.
Mary, I'd put you on the payroll because whenever you call the show, you talk a lot of sense. What do you think about the BBC?
Well, quite a few years ago now, Panorama was making a documentary on Tommy Robinson, and they were interviewing him, and he took in with him a camera. Anyway, they abandoned the project because it was so riddled with lies about.
Interesting.
They abandoned it. Now, the recent saga that we've had, that we keep hearing about now, I wonder if, in their way, the BBC exacerbated the war in Gaza. The first comments right in the early days about that hospital.
Yes, I remember that.
They did as it was false, that they'd got it wrong, but they still stood by it. Now, that's like when people say to you, I'm ever so sorry, but then, they're not really sorry.
Well, that's right. And I'm so glad, Mary, that you mentioned that hospital bombing. Because
Jeremy Bowen.
It proved quite strategically significant in not just the coverage of the war, but actually the conduct of the war as well.
100%. It's a great example because it was put to Jeremy Bowen, who made these comments about the hospital, and he said, I'm not retracting them. Despite the fact they've been proved to be categorically incorrect, he refused to retract the statement. And I think that shows the arrogance and the fact of, how dare you question me? I'm the BBC. I'm the trusted one. What I say is actually what's going on. I think that is a huge problem within a lot of the kind of elite within the public institutions now, is that they look down on people rather than listening, or more irritatingly, they tell you what they think you think, and that's really annoying. It's just like, listen to somebody rather than putting words in the mouth. After Brexit, the BBC was terrible, and it's doubled down. This incident on Gaza is atrocious, but this one with Trump, I mean, like you said, they covered over the edits. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing, and they looked the other way when it came to actually the standards and making sure that what went out to the public was right. And somebody has to be held accountable for that. And I do hope Trump sues and shuts the thing down.
Mary, do you still watch the BBC?
Pardon?
Do you still watch the BBC?
Oh no, I got rid of my TV licence, stopped paying that about 10 years ago. In fact, I did tell you that the other day. I just don't listen to it. I'm quite happy with what I've got at the moment now. But who knows that maybe Trump might have won the last election. You don't know if this influenced voters, because a lot of people were horrified about that, and there was given so much publicity about how he'd inspired the riots and this, that and the other. Well, he might have, for all we know, have won the last election. We could be in a different place now as well.
Far be it from me, Mary, to say whether or not that election in 2020 was stolen. I think it's important to look at these things with a cold, calculated perspective, and without bias, fear or favour. Mary, look, really enjoyed that. Do call me again soon. Have an excellent Sunday. That's Mary in Hemel Hempstead, who hasn't paid the licence fee, Mike, in a decade. That means, by my rather poor mathematic calculations, she saved around £1,500. A lot of money.
Well, I suppose given the cuts at the BBC, that's £1,500 they'll very much miss at the moment.
They still have a huge whopping budget of over $1 billion. I mean, what are they doing with it apart from going to lunch?
Exactly. Mike, I want to build bridges with you. I think you're right about a lot of things, and I would like to see more investment in things like the
NHS. You burnt them in the first place, Mark.
Well, I probably have. But
I'm very much a bridge open kind of guy.
Well, that's it. Well, let me throw on some kind of some inflatable things so that we can connect ideologically, because we can both agree that we want the public sector to be properly financed. You know, policing, education, NHS. Right. Upon that, we can all agree. The issue with the BBC is the sheer cost of it, the massive budget, as Peter mentioned, and now they take that money from the public without moral authority following the Panorama scandal and the leaked memo.
I think if anyone could claim a lack of moral authority for the BBC, it wouldn't be to do with this Panorama investigation alone. It would be to do with the fact that they do not consume the content the BBC produces today, that we have the most pluralistic media landscape we've ever really enjoyed, including this fine station, YouTube. People can now choose their media diet. We're not stuck in an era now of 3, 4, 5 TV channels that we had growing up. And ultimately, if people like Mary do not watch the BBC, let alone feel connection with the content it produces, let alone believe the news it produces as well, then they have to ask themselves, why am I funding it in the first place?
Because it's a law. That's the problem. They don't have a choice. If you don't pay it, you watch the BBC, you are breaking the law. People keep arguing for the BBC as though it's some kind of choice. It isn't. Not in reality, because if the people have been prosecuted for it.
If you own a telly and you turn it on, then you're on the hook.
It's ridiculous. But can I just pick up on a really quick point on the whether Trump lost the election and all this kind of stuff? This is a misunderstanding of fake news. Fake news isn't just a lie. Fake news is the creation of a narrative based on certain situations. So it's the positioning of information in an article. It's the words you use to lead into a story. That is the more dangerous bit, because you can make anything sound like you want it to sound when you order information in a particular way. And that is what the BBC have been doing when it comes to these documentaries, because they're not necessarily lying to you. They're moving information around and presenting it in a way they want it presented. That is more insidious, because a lie could be easily proven wrong. A simple Google shuts most of that down. What we're seeing in our media, particularly on the left, I have to admit, more than anywhere else, is the fact that, say, the ethnicity of a terrorist is on the 16th paragraph of an article. That's not an accident. It's there because most people don't read that far. And that's the bit that we've got to start calling out, and the BBC are the worst for it.
Mike, briefly, you get the last word on this.
I don't think we can say that BBC shifting of articles affected the outcome of the 2020 election. There is no doubt that Donald Trump lost that election. He lost both the popular vote and the electoral college vote as well. What I think the point Peter is making is that the weighting given in articles, and we see this in every form of journalism too, does affect how people read it. And again, this all comes back to the editorial judgment, the poor editorial judgment that led this documentary to go out in the first place as well. That speech by Donald Trump is infamous now for what it incited people to do on that day. What it has done, unfortunately, is given the 47th president a justification now to point to what had previously been a trusted media source for many people and say they made this up, and that every little seed of doubt erodes away at someone like Donald Trump's, the confidence people have to stand up to Trump and his ability to perpetrate false narratives.
But that's up to the BBC then not to lie. You can't blame somebody for saying that guy lied when they lied. This is half of the problem, is that the people that brought down in public institutions are the people within them, because they protected themselves, they shut people off, and they don't believe in transparency. The more that happens, these stories go from what should be, say, 2 out of 10 to 10 out of 10, because it's built a narrative of they don't like us. The people, I've often said that things like the BBC, they have to be saved from their friends before they're saved from their enemies, because they're the people that will bring them down quicker than anybody on the right ever will.
Well, the issue with the BBC is because it's paid for from a public tax, they must be beyond reproach. If I was a BBC host, I would not do Dolan's dispatch, because that's not appropriate. Whereas you choose to listen to talk, and of course you don't have to pay for it, which is magnificent. It's gloriously free. But if I was on the Beeb, there would be no Dolan's dispatch. Okay, what I would do is give you the information of the day, and then we would have a balanced panel, and it would be my job to deliver complete equality of opinion. And that's where the BBC has fallen down, and that's why so many people are walking away from the corporation and not paying that licence fee. We're going to get to this next, which is very important. It's a message from Ian in Liverpool. Good morning, Mark. Regarding net zero, no one appears to have told us how exactly it will affect our climate. I'm old enough to remember the political class prophets warning us about acid rain and the ice age coming and oil running out in 10 years. Well, Ian, you're right about that. Even Bill Gates, who's one of the biggest climate alarmists out there, has said, actually, climate change, nothing to see here. Time to look after the poor. So here's a question for you. The Prince of Wales, Prince William, is very vocal on net zero this week. Should he butt out of party politics? We'll debate that next.
BBC in crisis with this dossier?
Where do you start? I mean, is it in crisis? I mean, there seems to be a crisis every week. And what we're talking about here is somebody who has an opinion, which whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, is still an opinion. And some of the things that are being said do have to be investigated.
But it's not an opinion to point out that video of Donald Trump was edited.
No, it's an opinion. It's an opinion because obviously it's editing. You edit everything. The fact of the matter is, you make a decision as to whether or not you feel it's actually still reflective of the overall key message.
Yeah.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, listen, I've got to say, I can't remember the message board being this full. It is groaning with your wise opinions, and let me get to some of them now. Tracy in Chingford. Mark, in World War II, there was camaraderie. They knew what they were fighting for. Everyone helped each other. Neighbours were there for each other, but now there's no camaraderie. There's no helping each other, and you don't know your neighbours. It's so sad to see. I agree, Tracy. It's our crumbling society. It's just not working, is it? Ian in Essex. Mark, a lot of people are scared of saying what they actually feel in fear of being called racist. All I will say is that the people we're letting into this country do not have the same values we have, and we're letting them gradually put their values over ours because we're scared of going against them and being called racist. Ian, you're so right. That's been weaponised against people for far too long now. Amanda says, Mark, did our war heroes die in vain? It certainly looks like we're heading that way. We have to turn things around before it's too late. We could make a start by teaching our children some of the old values of decency, thought for others, and all the good things our country has given the world. You're absolutely right. And lastly, Nick, who says, good morning, Mark, a very moving show with some excellent contributors. My issue is how we fix Britain when we have such huge swathes of the country where Britain is unrecognisable. How do we fix litter, crime, antisocial behaviour, drugs? It's gone too far. And although I'm a reform supporter, I believe that even Nigel can't help us now. What do you think about that, Peter Barnes?
I completely agree. Nigel Farage is not the answer to anything, or any question, really. But the fundamental thing...
You're a reform sceptic, aren't you?
Reform sceptic, I think that's a little serving it light.
But Britain needs change.
It does, but one thing we have to accept...
Not going to get it from the Tories.
For me... The problem is we keep saying collapsing, not collapsed. We can't move forward if we keep being in downfall. We have to make a line, draw a line and say, now we change things. The more we continue to have this narrative of Britain's falling apart, we're never going to be able to put it back together again. We have to, as a nation, have a moment of... this is enough. And people in charge have to start leading. The big problem we have is we have no leaders, whether they be cultural, political, nobody like that, not really. And then also, we also have to play our own part in this and get involved. You know, the number of people, you sit here and you listen to them say all this kind of stuff. I'm like, where are you at your local charity groups? Where are you helping out? Are you doing your bit? Because I go back to the Remembrance Sunday.
I think people are doing their bit.
But not in the same numbers to which they were back in the day, that we've become a much more selfish society. For that, I point to the welfare bill, for example.
Well, Trevor wants to know how we're going to fix the country, and so does Nick. And I'm going to answer that because neither of you will. And it's whoever gets in, but it's likely to be Reformer and the Farage. They're going to tear up the ECHR and revoke the Human Rights Act and look at the Refugee Convention, which means that we can return people immediately and detain them. The other thing they're going to do is reduce the size of the welfare state and cut taxes so that the economy grows so we can look after the poor. And they're going to axe net zero, which is going to save a fortune for people trying to heat their homes. Plus, they will tackle wokery in our public institutions so that we can love Britain again. There you go. Without an
none of that is possible.
Okay, well, listen, here's hoping. Trevor, that's my answer. Can Nigel do it is the million-dollar question. And I would say Mike and Peter say no. Now, listen, let's get to William, because he's been at COP and he's been discussing net zero. Should he stay out of politics, Mike?
No, I think this is an issue that affects everybody across the planet, and especially, as we've just been hearing, the huge cost that goes with it as well. We are talking about a societal level transformation that is needed here, and I don't want to see people with the resources and wealth of the royal family sitting back and not opining on an issue like this as well, especially given that, things like offshore wind are often situated in territorial waters that are owned by the Crown Estate as well. The royal family has an interest in this as well. Now, you can question about the pronouncements and about the level of societal transformation that will go with, and how much resource should come from the wealthiest people in society to achieve that, and how much should fall on the smallest shoulders, which should be the smallest possible burden. But ultimately, there is a well-established evidence base for changing climate. We've seen changing weather patterns in this country over the last 10, 20 years.
What's the point in us doing it if China don't? What is the point?
I think everyone needs to do their bit as well. But you hit on a very good point there, that China, as a rapidly industrialised country now moving to a post-industrial model has got there off the back of fossil fuels. And I think if countries like America and the UK aren't pursuing this, particularly the US, it lacks credibility. But if someone is not prepared to lead the way, then why should others follow?
OK, Elliot's in Bushy. What do you think about the Prince of Wales speaking out on net zero, given how political it is, Elliot?
I think it's very dangerous indeed. The royal family, if they're not careful, they're just going to do themselves in. There's three things here. The royal family are meant to be above the constitution, above politics. In other words, they unify the constitution of this once great country. By doing what he's doing, he needs to be very careful. He can give his views in a very diplomatic way, but he should not be seen alongside Starmer. It's wrong, and it's completely adverse to what the royal family should be doing. And in addition to that, if I may say, it is connected with the generic issue with the royal family. They've got enough problem with Andrew, but there is a key unwritten element of our constitution which says, Mark, that using the royal name should not allow you to make any money. Well, just look at Andrew, look at Harry. So what I'm trying to say in a nutshell, here's another additional element of our own very great royal family, which I'm a supporter of, ruining themselves and ruining the historical constitutional makeup of this country. He should not. He can give his views in a very diplomatic way.
Well, diplomatically, you're absolutely right. Elliot, we're out of time, but I agree with every word. Prince of Wales, stay out of politics. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you to Mike and to Peter. Anne Widdecombe is next.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa. And many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the Channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning to you. It is 3 minutes past 9. I'm Mark Dolan. This is Talk Breakfast, a very busy show this morning on Remembrance Sunday. Why is this day so important? I'll be asking some of the country's finest military veterans. But given the state of modern Britain, was that fight in vain? Also breaking this morning, Labour MPs call on the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood to, wait for it, soften her immigration plans. We'll bring you more on this growing political row, which could see numbers coming into the country explode rather than shrink. Plus, Labour MPs don't want to cut spending, but they're now telling the government not to raise taxes either. An all-out war is breaking out within our governing party of this country, the Labour Party. Will Keir Starmer be the biggest casualty? Andrew Neil, one of the most respected journalists in the country, says the Prime Minister is on borrowed time and he'll be gone sooner rather than later. So how long has Starmer got? And the BBC bias row rages on, with Donald Trump attacking our national state broadcaster as the fake news BBC. Is it time now to axe the hated licence fee? I'll be asking several people that have worked for the BBC, and I want your opinions. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also do a voice note as well. So much to get through, a busy hour to come, and as the saying goes, let's talk. And let's do just that in the company of a very old friend of mine, one of my favourite broadcasters, the former Home Office Minister as well, Anne Widdecombe. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning to you.
And it's been too long. It's our first conversation since my return to the home of common sense. And thank you for joining us on this very important and sacred day. Why does Remembrance Sunday matter so much? Why is it so significant?
It's significant for several reasons. The first is, of course, to remember those who died giving their lives for their country. People from all over Britain, and indeed for that matter, going further afield, what was then, we would have said, the Commonwealth in the definition then. When we actually consider that it went from young people to older people, from people from no educational background at all to people who gave up their time at Oxford with degrees, everybody, just everybody in the country, regardless of age, class, whatever it might be, gave their lives for Britain, that Britain might be free, that Britain would not be ruled by a foreign power, and the power we were fighting at the time was also an evil power, that we wouldn't be ruled by a foreign power. That was the whole point of the fight, that we wouldn't have swastikas up and down Whitehall. And we need to remember that, because I often look at the young of today and I think, you don't know how lucky you are. You haven't been called up. You haven't been asked to face the ultimate sacrifice. And let's also remember, I mean, yes, we remember the dead today, but let's remember people who came back with lifelong, serious disabilities, who came back without sight, without hearing, without legs or arms, whatever it might be. The sacrifice was huge, and it was also huge amongst the ordinary civilian population who were bombed, who, my grandmother, for example, came up from an air raid shelter. She had no home left. It had gone. It had been bombed. And I mean, I do have to comment that when I hear some of the snowflakes today, I think, how on earth would you have coped with what, the previous generation coped with?
And have the sacrifices and has the legacy of our war heroes, Anne, been squandered by successive administrations since the war?
Totally. I don't think it started initially. I think you're probably looking around about the 70s before you saw a real change in values. But it's escalated since then. And indeed, donkey's years ago, I actually wrote a page in the Express to exactly that effect, to, the people then who were giving up their lives or putting their lives at risk then, looking at society as it is now, would wonder what on earth it was all about.
Most definitely. And I'm now obliged, Anne, and I'm sure that this video will have crossed your radar given the fact that you are, of course, still a very active journalist as well as broadcaster on your Substack, which I'll mention before we're finished. But let's take a listen to this viral video of, if we can, actually, you probably need time to set that up, don't you? Is it ready? Dan, is it ready? There you go. Dan is the man with the plan. So this, of course, is a well-reported interview on Good Morning Britain this week, hosted by Kate Garraway and Adil Ray. And you have a 100-year-old war veteran who rather pricked the pin into the bubble of status quo when it came to his remarks about the legacy of fighting in the Second World War. Take a listen.
My message is, I can see in my mind's eye there was rows and rows of white stones of all the hundreds of my friends and everybody else that gave their lives for what? The country of today. No, I'm sorry. The sacrifice wasn't worth the result that it is now.
There's a debate raging, Anne, about what this remarkable man meant when he said that the fight wasn't worth fighting. What's your interpretation?
Well, first of all, if you look at the country, it's absolutely riddled with crime. Our health service, which of course was brought in after the war, but doesn't actually produce quite often the results that we had before we had a health service. If you look at crime, you look at health, you look at the fact that we've lost control of our borders, but we're not a sovereign state anymore. We're still far too much governed by EU regulations. And if you just look round at the collapse of family and community, which were the core of pre-war Britain, and indeed the immediate post-war Britain, then I think you do see exactly what he means. But I think Britain is worth saving. I think it can be saved. And I think it can become a great country again. Great, not in the sense of make America great again, but great in the sense of let us all look after each other again.
Most definitely. How do we reclaim this country? How do we make Britain Britain again, Anne, given that we've lost our national identity? What levers would you pull if you were in power?
Well, first of all, there's no magic wand. I mean, that should be made abundantly clear.
Yeah.
I think the return of common sense to the country, something that Britain used to be renowned for, the return of self-reliance, and also the return of people demanding things of themselves. I mean, if you think what people had to demand of themselves during the Second World War, we ask trivial compared to that now. And the only way that can happen is if you have a government which gives a lead and a government which makes it possible. Now, you can't make an irresponsible citizen responsible overnight, but you can make it not worth his while to be irresponsible. And that, of course, is one of the big keys to coping with crime.
Well, I think you're so right, because, Anne, the political revolution that we need is going to happen at a bureaucratic level with the civil service. It will happen at the top end of top echelons of the government, the cabinet, which will likely be replaced unilaterally in 3.5 years' time. There's going to be economic changes as well. But there's got to be a cultural change, hasn't there? A change in our society.
There has, but I think that starts with individual citizens. Cultural change starts there. And we're where we are now because a particular viewpoint has prevailed, what you call the woke viewpoint. And also the idea that government is helpless, which it is not. It is not helpless when it comes to crime. It's not helpless when it comes to the NHS. It can do things. But what I think, and I've said this so often, we see the absence of, in current government, and I use that word with a small g, in current government, the absence of will. There is just no will to get these things faced up to and treated. That's what we need. Mrs. Thatcher had it, Winston Churchill had it, some other leaders have had it. We ain't got it now.
Now, Anne, it's my understanding that you joined the Brexit Party in January 2019. You left the Conservatives. It became Reform UK in 2021. Do you feel vindicated by that decision? Because I think that you called this very early in relation to how left-wing the Conservative Party in its current incarnation has become.
Well, the reason that I joined the Brexit Party at the time was because I wanted Brexit, for heaven's sake. We'd voted 3 years earlier to leave the EU. We were still in the EU. We still hadn't got a deal. we hadn't got anything. And I left the Conservative Party then to get Brexit, joined the Brexit Party. I didn't immediately join Reform. I was homeless, politically homeless for about a year. And then I saw the way Reform was going, and I thought, yes, I think there are some answers here. This is what we need. Do I feel vindicated? Yes. I vividly remember in my first meeting with Zia Yusuf, a couple of years ago now, he said to me, Reform will be the next government. And I thought, oh, yes, that's very commendable loyalty. But, we'll need a bit longer than that. He was right. We will be the next government. And now we've got a huge challenge ahead of us. But I think it's a challenge in which an awful lot of people in Britain will want to join and to join that big fight to get a country.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, to get a country.
I was going to say to get a country that is based on family and community.
Interrupt Anne Widdecombe at your peril, let me tell you, fellow broadcasters. Anne, Reform UK, no experience in government. It's just a talking shop, isn't it?
No, that's exactly what it is not. You think where we've come from. We were in control of no councils at all this time last year. Now we're in control of 10.
And putting up taxes.
And we will not put up taxes in government, but what we will do is to stimulate growth. And as the economy grows, then we will indeed reduce taxes. We are a tax-cutting party, but what we're not going to do is do what the other parties do and make wild promises. Wild promises about, how we're going to spend in the first year or something. And then, as Rachel Reeves proves, you can't deliver on it.
Indeed. So you'll be quite pleased with Nigel Farage's recent announcement that some of the broader ambitions to, for example, raise the tax-free threshold to £20,000 will come in due course, but not immediately. It's the perceived Achilles heel of the Reform project to make the numbers work, isn't it?
Well, we'll make the numbers work if we stimulate growth, and in order to stimulate growth, you do need some tax cuts. But I think the question is how much and how soon. But if your aim is to do that, and if you aim to be judged on that when the next election comes along, then we will do it. And we will not be flattened as Liz Truss was, for example, but she tried to do far too much, far too soon. But we will not be flattened by people telling us that we can't do it. We can, but we'll do it in a responsible way.
There will be great expectations if Reform UK win the next election. And does it play on your mind that delivery is going to be so difficult, such a challenge with the left-wing progressive blob and with just the challenges of government?
Think what a state the country was in 1979 when Mrs. T came in. Just think of it. People forget now. We were called the sick man of Europe. Our economy was being virtually managed by the International Monetary Fund. We had strikes everywhere. Britain just wasn't working, wasn't functioning. You couldn't even get buried because the gravedigger's were on strike. And people forget how bad it was. And what you got there was a very determined leader who said, Britain can get out of this, and we will. And what you've got now is one determined leader, quite honestly, and that's Nigel Farage. And the others are the talk shops.
Anne, is Nigel Farage cut from the same cloth as Mrs. Thatcher?
Oh, they're very different personalities. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Does he have her attention to detail, her work ethic, her disciplined lifestyle, her vision?
Oh, he's got more than her work ethic. I mean, he's regularly up at 5 in the morning. He's definitely got her work ethic. I've no doubt about that. And as far as attention to detail goes, let me quote you what Michael Heseltine always used to say when he was being pressed on the detail of the poll tax, which was mightily complicated. And he said very simply, you asked, do you know such and such, Mr. Heseltine? He said, no, but I know a man who does, and turned immediately to Michael Portillo, who was sitting there on his right. It was his job to have the detail. It was Heseltine's job to make the policy. And we need to remember that it isn't the Prime Minister who has to do the sums, but he's got to know that the sums are in good hands, and he's got to know what they add up to.
And we've got a short intermission coming up. Are you able to stay and take some calls from my viewers and listeners?
Yes, I will postpone my worship of Almighty God for another half hour.
Oh my goodness, well I definitely don't want to get you in trouble with the man above. So listen, book your call. Would you like to speak to Anne? If so, give us a call, 0344 499 1000. We've got 3 big topics to get through before Anne runs off to Mass. She doesn't need to pray for forgiveness for anything, by the way. And what I want to discuss is, should Prince William stay out of net zero politics? Did our war dead sacrifice their lives in vain? And is it time to axe the hated TV tax, the licence fee? We'll discuss all of that with Anne Widdecombe and your calls next.
BBC in crisis with this dossier?
Where do you start? I mean, is it in crisis? I mean, there seems to be a crisis every week. And what we're talking about here is somebody who has an opinion, which whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, is still an opinion. And some of the things that are being said do have to be investigated.
But it's not an opinion to point out that video of Donald Trump was edited.
No, it's an opinion. It's an opinion because obviously it's editing. You edit everything. The fact of the matter is, you make a decision as to whether or not you feel it's actually still reflective of the overall key message.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, Mark, says Brad. I love Anne Widdecombe, but I disagree regarding this country's ability to become great again. We've allowed our main cities to be totally controlled by those who wish to completely change our culture, and it's impossible to reverse. Well, Anne Widdecombe and her presence on Talk Breakfast has provoked a full switchboard, and George is in Dundee. Good morning, George.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Thanks for calling. What would you like to say to myself and Anne Widdecombe?
It's just very quickly, Anne Widdecombe summed it up there. Individual responsibility. To change this country, we all need to start changing our own moral compass and our own minds. Then our family, then the community we live in, then the city, then the 4 nations, and then the kingdom. We are the majority, and it starts within your own mind, and it is fantastic to hear somebody like Anne Widdecombe saying that.
Well, that's right. Steve has messaged in George and he said, good morning, Mark. Could you tell Anne she's a diamond? We ignore her advice at our peril. Stay with us, George. Anne, how is that delivered in the real world? Is this about messaging in the classroom? How do we establish a culture of self-responsibility and contribution?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the classroom, because certainly an awful lot starts there. And one of our big problems today is that rigorous traditional education has been displaced by cultural education, by teaching values which may not necessarily be shared at home. And I think that school is about the 3 R's, and it's about learning, and home is where it actually all starts, and home is very important. But you do need a change in the culture, because at the moment the culture is one of woke, one of snowflakery, one of take your words out and look at them before you utter them, because it might get you into trouble. And free speech is a distant memory. And government can at least legislate free speech, but you then need the cultural change coming in behind, whereby that is what people then exercise and respect.
George, are you optimistic about the future with the right administration in place?
Yes. Well, what's the alternative, Mark? What's the alternative? If you're not optimistic, what is the alternative? Because this country on the present course is heading to hell in a handcart. So you've got to be optimistic.
And George, Reform UK are rising in popularity in Scotland, aren't they?
They are. Unfortunately, the SNP will still win the next Scottish election, but there's a very good chance of Reform finishing second, which will set them up nicely for the general election.
George, really enjoyed your call. Call me again soon. George in Dundee there, with an optimistic message that, yes, we need change, but change will come. And that's the point, Anne. We need to be very optimistic, don't we? I got a message in from Deborah who said, "Hi, Mark, I'm too shy to call, but could you ask Anne the following? What are the policies on pensioners? Labour seems to be targeting them. Will Reform overturn Labour's policies and reduce the pension age and increase the state pension? And what about that triple lock, Anne? It's expensive, isn't it?"
Right, first of all, let me go to that first question. No, Reform will not reduce the state pension age for one very simple reason: we can't afford it. The state pension age has been put up by successive governments. Tory, Labour coalition have put up the state pension age simply because when we introduced the pension, or if you don't even bother when we introduced the pension, just look at 1950, immediately after the war, women's average longevity was 69 years. Now you think about that. 69 years. So we were paying for 9 years of pension. Today it's 83, so you're asking the state to pay for 23 years of pension. So we can't reduce the state pension age, but bluntly, we can't go on putting it up either, because people reach the point where it just common sense, they simply can't work.
And go on.
I'm sorry to get bogged down on this, but
No, do it.
Because I think a lot of people think that governments just, are extending the state pension age because they want extra money. In fact, they're doing it because they can't afford what we've got at the moment.
And fantastic stuff. Lots of my viewers and listeners want to know about the fate of the BBC in the event on the occasion of a Reform UK government. Georgina is one of them. Good morning, Georgina.
Good morning, Mark. And you have a woman there who is of my own kidney, Anne Widdecombe. Good morning, Anne. I wanted to ring up and say that the BBC is no longer the representation of British standards in broadcasting, as well as everything else within this crumbling society. It's corrupt, woke and politically biased. No longer can we switch on the television and watch honest representations of world news. We seem to be watching politically or culturally biased propaganda that pushes lies and narratives totally alien to normality. We've had lies being told about presidents. We've had woke and trans ideologies being tucked into children's programmes. We've had more pedophiles than you could shake a pitchfork at who've been charged, who've worked at the BBC, and terrorist children presenting documentaries. The list is endless. Sometimes, sorry is not a good enough apology, and those at the head of the BBC need to take responsibility for the actions of their organisation. As far as I can see, no one is being held responsible or indeed accountable. The misleading news keeps being transmitted, and it's business as usual. Well, the buck must stop with the top man. Tim Davie, if he has any honour, now needs to step down, as it's quite obvious that all these things have happened on his watch and allowed to happen right under his nose. And he's not been savvy enough to do his due diligence, or he's turned a blind eye, whichever. So it's his head that should roll. You can only pass the buck, Mark, so much. And then the serious faux pas of the BBC need to be addressed.
Anne, you might have met your match.
I think I might well have done, yes. I think all those comments about the BBC are true. I think that, however, if you simply want Tim Davies' head on a plate, that doesn't guarantee that anything's going to be different in the future. And I think that any incoming government should make it clear to the BBC that it's drinking in the last chance saloon, that it's got to actually implement, not just talk about, but implement impartiality, that it's got to make sure that its journalists actually do know the difference between reporting a fact and making a comment. And there is an enormous difference between the two that I sometimes think is lost sight of. So, yes, the BBC is not as impartial as it should be. Yes, it does produce an awful lot of rubbish paid for by you and me. But I think it can be tackled. It's not going to be tackled by just demanding a resignation. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm saying it's not enough in itself. Won't do anything.
And also, Anne, be careful what you wish for, because Tim Davie is certainly formerly a Conservative supporter. It could completely descend into pure, unadulterated leftism in his absence.
Oh, you mean it hasn't done that already? Yes, you're quite right.
Good. It's a good point. It's a good point. Anne, what would you like to see happen to the licence fee?
To what? Sorry?
The licence fee. What would you like to see happening to the licence fee?
Well, Reform will have a policy on that in due course, so let me make it very clear now that I'm responding as Anne Widdecombe and not as a Reform spokesman. My view is that we should probably curtail the licence fee. I don't mind paying for the World Service, for example, and Radio 3 and one or two other stations which simply wouldn't survive on commercial criteria alone, because their content is such that, you know, it's not the popular soaps, and so they're not going to attract the big ads. So I think we do need to preserve the best of it, but I think we now need to curtail it so that we're not funding the rubbish anymore.
Before I let you go, Anne, the Prince of Wales is an impressive chap. He'll be our next king, our next monarch, of course. I'm sure he'll do a good job. He has sparked some degree of controversy with his presence at the COP Environmental Summit with speeches about net zero. Has he crossed a line?
Yes. I think that William has got to be very, very careful. I mean, at the moment he's the Prince of Wales and he can get away with a certain amount. When he's the monarch, it doesn't matter how strongly he feels about something, he's got to stay above the fray. And I think we all know that climate change, or our response to climate change, is a massively hot potato politically. Reform have said we're going to abolish the net zero targets. You know, we're going to save all that money. You've got China and the United States blasting, you know, vast quantities of carbon dioxide into the air, while we only account for less than 1% of the world's carbon emissions. So, you know, we're a very, very small player, and we shouldn't be putting such burdens on our own citizens when other countries just ignore the whole issue. So I think William has to be careful. I mean, what is he going to do when he gets a government next time? Because I think it's when Reform wins, not if Reform wins, which actually doesn't want to just go along with the current obsession. We want to take proportionate steps, not disproportionate steps. What is he going to do when he becomes monarch if he's got a government that takes that attitude? He will be in a difficult position. Therefore, the way to stay out of that position is not to get involved in the politics of it, appearing alongside the Prime Minister at this time.
Anne, a joyous reunion. What a delight to have you on Talk Breakfast. Wishing you all the very best on this important day of Remembrance Sunday. My thanks to former Government Minister, broadcaster and best-selling author Anne Widdecombe. A lot of love coming for Anne in the message board, and thank you for your calls and texts. Lots more to come, including a shock new development. Labour MPs are now pressuring the Home Secretary to loosen her approach and soften her approach to immigration, which means numbers could explode. We'll debate that next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, Anne Widdecombe's gone down a storm this morning. We must get her back. Hi, Mark, says Penny in Essex. Could you tell Anne that she came to Bulwood Hall Prison years ago and I met her with Michael Howard? She's absolutely brilliant and I was a member of staff at that prison. Well, thank you very much for that, Penny. The prison service has gone downhill since you left. I think that's quite clear. And I bet you people wouldn't be released accidentally on your watch. Thank you for all your texts and calls and voice notes and everything. It's been a very busy show. Don't forget that I'm back next weekend and I'm doing Friday morning. I'm sitting in for the big man on Friday breakfast as well, Talk Breakfast from 6 a.m. So 3 days in a row. It's too much for many people, but I'll be back on Friday. I hope you'll join me then. Now listen, Labour MPs have urged Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, to soften her plans for a Danish-style overhaul of the immigration and asylum system. The Home Secretary is expected soon to announce new, tougher measures on migration, taking inspiration from Denmark's system, seen as one of the toughest in Europe. Ms Mahmood, who sent officials to Denmark to examine the system, is understood to be looking at tighter rules on family reunion and restricting certain refugees to a temporary stay in Britain. But MPs on the left of the Labour Party have condemned the plans as hardcore and, wait for it, far right, and have urged her to soften the approach. Nadia Whittome, Labour MP for Nottingham East, went as far as to claim that the policies were racist. She told the BBC, "I think this is a dead end, morally, politically and electorally. I think these are policies of the far right. I don't think anyone wants to see a Labour government flirting with them." Well, if Nadia Whittome gets her way, then numbers could explode rather than shrink. Let's get reaction now from public policy specialist Lucy White. Good morning, Lucy.
Hi, Mark. Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Good to have you on the programme and your common sense opinions, because this is Labour MPs encouraging this rather lax Labour government that believe in open borders to loosen migration rules further, which means that numbers will explode.
Yeah, well, the first thing to understand is that the UK does not need to go to Denmark for advice on immigration. It's very simple. We just detain them and deport them. We don't need to be doing gimmicks around Europe and getting inspiration. And if we were to get inspiration from anyone, it would of course have to be the United States of America. Because in Trump's first 250 days, 2 million people have been deported, which includes 1.6 million self-deportation, so those that left voluntarily, that's 1.6 million, and then 400,000 forced removals. So if we want to know how to deport people, we just look at the United States of America. We don't need to go to Denmark. That is just absurd. And one of the other things to be aware of Denmark is that they are offering the equivalent of £24,000 for asylum seekers to leave. And of course, we're not going to be paying them to leave. They just need to go. It's very simple.
Indeed, and that's the public will, is it not? Do you think that the Home Secretary is under pressure from her own party to do the policies that the country needs? I mean, can you see her being persuaded by some of these characters?
No, well, the thing you have to think about with Nadia Whittome is she herself is of Indian descent, so she is a migrant. So I think, you know, she has these inherent biases within herself to look out for perhaps these migrants because of her own...
Is she British born or not?
She is, yes, but still, I just think that, you know, these inherent biases, in my opinion, is why only English natives, only natives of our countries should be in the British Parliament, because otherwise you have these sort of these biases. And I think people like Nadia Whittome don't understand the temperature of the country. She's speaking from a very close-minded left-wing angle, which does not represent the views of the country. And so the Home Secretary, while I fundamentally disagree with her, and I don't think she should be Home Secretary at all, or even in the Parliament, I think she is at least understanding that if she doesn't go hard on immigration, people will vote reform, and that's what she's afraid of.
Well, yes. I mean, I wonder, though, about that issue of, sort of cultural ethnicity, background, race, that kind of thing. Given the fact that, Rishi Sunak is of British Indian heritage, and he's the guy that coined the term "stop the boats," and he was very enthusiastic about the Rwanda policy. Meanwhile, it's a white British Prime Minister in Keir Starmer that's opened the borders.
Yes, well, the borders were already opened under Rishi Sunak as well. I think in 2023 we had the highest immigration, which was 906,000 net migration in a single year. The main ethnicity is, of course, India, followed by Nigeria and Pakistan. So he speaks, stop the boats, but in reality, the main migrants coming into the country were from India. And I do believe that there is, it's not by coincidence. But
are you sure? I mean, I don't want to sort of put words in your mouth here, but this issue of foreign heritage, I'm just not sure, because look at Boris Johnson, right? He couldn't be more British than as it gets, and he's responsible for the greatest breach of our national borders in the history of this country, and the Boris wave.
Yeah, and of course you can look at his Home Secretary at the time, but also I do think it's partly incompetence, but you also have these self-inherent biases that do play out. I think fundamentally we need a pro-British government that will put our people first.
Sure.
So with the asylum issue, is once they get into the UK, they should be held at Manston Immigration Centre in Kent. And instead of being processed for asylum claims, they need to be processed for deportation flights. And if they refuse to tell us where they have come from, then there needs to be a third country in place where they're going to be deported to. Because we've seen time and time again, every single day, there's been a rape or a murder or a stabbing, on a train, or someone walking their dog. We cannot continue in this way. And so the issue is now a national crisis. And by going to Denmark, it doesn't solve the problem. By coming up with these gimmicks doesn't solve the problem. And particularly once the asylum seekers are in our country, they often just escape into the public. They might even leave their hotels. And there are, thousands upon thousands of these illegal migrants that the government has just lost track of.
It's absolutely mind-boggling, isn't it, Lucy, that you can enter the country illegally and not be detained, and in fact receive a mobile phone, dentistry, a GP appointment, spending money, 3 meals a day, accommodation, and the freedom to roam.
Yeah, it's just awful. So you do have to wonder, is it by design? Is it because they want the GDP to rise? But of course, population explosion leads to the need to build more houses to provide more services.
Yeah.
And so businesses and hotels profit from this. But by GDP per capita, we are poorer. We are not benefiting from this. And it's just very simple. We just need to detain them and deport them. We need remigration. And the only way to do this is a government that will take this seriously. But the current Labour government, because they are so divided, they have some on the left pulling for softer immigration, which is just suicidal. And you have some on the Labour government pushing for harder immigration policies. But the thing is, they're just not coherent. They're not joined up. And when you have a political party that is so divided, it's going to be impossible for them to actually make real achievements. So I think all we can hope for now is a snap general election to get a new government in, a reform government who will actually hopefully be harder on this issue.
I mean, is there a danger, Lucy, that we're setting ourselves up for a fall, and a future administration will find that even if they tear up the ECHR and revoke the Human Rights Act and look again at the Refugee Convention, that still the blob, the bureaucracy, the judiciary essentially thwart the public will? Is there a danger that it still won't happen and that we won't stop the boats? Does that worry you?
No, that doesn't worry me, because we've seen that the Ethiopian illegal migrant who sexually assaulted someone in Epping, he's actually been deported to Ethiopia. And so we know that people can actually be deported. Of course, the ECHR and the Human Rights Act, they need to be scrapped. And we need to have our own laws, so our own British laws for our own immigration policy.
British Bill of Rights, all the rest of it.
Yes, exactly. And we have shown that we can deport them. And so the fact that they're not being deported now is just ridiculous. And as I say, we need to look at the US. We don't need to be looking to Denmark for ideas. But we don't need to look to any country, actually. We have a fantastic country with fantastic people. We have the capabilities to do it all ourselves. We just need the right people in power. And of course, the system or the blob, they are very much deterring this and preventing actual change from happening. But I think once you start to reform the civil service, reform the ministerial code, etc., you can start to make real change.
Do you think that, for example, Reform UK, who are ahead in the polls and therefore likely to win the election if the polls are accurate, do you think they need to manage expectations, though, about what can be done in the first term of a Reform UK government?
I think they've done quite well to manage expectations. They have discussed that their aim is to deport 600,000 illegal migrants in the first 5 years, which, although I believe is quite a low ball. It's, they can of course deport way more than that in the first term. That at least shows that they're being realistic. It shows that they're not saying, like Trump, we're going to deport 2 million in the first year. So I think that at least they're being realistic. But I think once they start, a lot of people will start to self-deport, which I think, so if you add this 600,000 forced deportations plus voluntary deportations, then the number itself starts to become quite bigger. And what I always advocate for is all of this is simply a return to normality. People need to remember that this country never needed mass migration. And so when we advocate for remigration or mass deportations, it's simply a return to normality. And that's the key that the British public need to remember. What we're advocating for is not radical. The current situation is radical. We just want the country back. We want England to be England, which is a return to normality.
Lucy, a delight to have you on the show. I hope you'll join us again in the near future. Lucy White is a public policy specialist whose message is clear. Enough is enough. But are reforms setting us up for a fall? OK, is it fantasy politics that we're going to stop the boats and send back foreign criminals? We'll get to your calls on that next.
BBC in crisis with this dossier?
Where do you start? I mean, is it in crisis? I mean, there seems to be a crisis every week. And what we're talking about here is somebody who has an opinion, which whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, is still an opinion. And some of the things that are being said do have to be investigated.
But it's not an opinion to point out that video of Donald Trump was edited.
No, it's an opinion. It's an opinion because obviously it's editing. You edit everything. The fact of the matter is you make a decision as to whether or not you feel it's actually still reflective of the overall key message.
Yeah. Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
9:48, you're listening to Talk Breakfast. Thank you to my excellent team today. Dan and Davis have done a great job, Chris as well, Kushti and Tech Op Dave. It's been a really busy 3 hours. I am returning on Friday morning, temporarily looking after that slot from 6 till 10 in the morning. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'd love you to join me, and thank you so much for your company today. And thank you to Kevin for calling the show. He's in Dorset. Morning, Kev.
Good morning.
Listen, top of the morning to you. How are things in Dorset on this rather fresh, brisk Sunday morning?
Semi-dismal. I'm getting ready to go down to the Remembrance service.
Oh, that's so nice. Is the sun making a bit of an appearance through the clouds or not?
It was a little bit earlier, but there's not much at the moment.
Well, listen, I'm very pleased that you're going to participate in Remembrance Sunday. It's very important what we do. And listen, let's talk about, I think you've called about the BBC and the bias row. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, I agree with pretty much everything that everybody's saying. The only take I have on it is slightly different, as always. Yes, the head man has to go, but the head man going doesn't solve the problem, as it never does. I look at it a different way. We look at the board. We look at the people who support the chairman, who give him the advice.
Yeah.
So we need to look at those guys and say, OK, so how many of you actually sent emails to him telling him that these things were wrong, what was being done? And if there aren't any, and if they can't prove their innocence, that they weren't knowledgeable of it, then they have to go too.
I think you're absolutely right about this. Accountability, isn't it? And this is a problem with the public sector, Kevin. There's no accountability. If it was a private company, heads would roll.
It is. I've been chairman before of various charities and organisations, and I've always said to them, I am the chairman. I don't make the final decision. I make sure that you're all informed, you give me the views, we do a vote, and then the vote carries it. No chairman should ever make a decision unless there is a hung council between his board members.
You're quite right about that. Kevin, one question for you, devil's advocate. Is this too much BBC bashing, given the fact that millions of people watch the BBC every week, millions of people listen to the BBC on the radio, millions of people read the BBC website, and the fact is that they're very happy customers. You know, it's a sort of world-class, revered organisation. Are we being too harsh on the BBC, given the many hundreds of hours that they generate every week and mistakes will be made?
I think the BBC still should exist. I think there's many parts of the BBC, radio, various other bits that are not affected by this. The programming and certain things. But having said that, certain programming, if you've watched it over the years, is being very much indoctrinated with a certain slant. I checked the BBC the other day of what their duties are under the licence fee. I brought this up with, I think it was Peter before.
Right.
And under the licence fee, it says they are not allowed to be political. Quite clearly, they are political. There's no two ways about it, because this one with Trump shows they're political.
Yes.
Therefore, they're not fit for purpose. Therefore, a new board needs to be brought in. There's no point in trying to sort of cut the head off the snake, but at the same time as respecting the people who love the BBC, I still pay the BBC licence fee. I listen to radio and various things. Do I listen to the news? Purely to get a balance. And I always find that when I watch the BBC and then I look at all the other channels, because I watch them all, and there is a narrative every single time which never was there when I was young. Never. You could trust the BBC. And the trouble is, they named themselves very clever, British Broadcasting Company. No, they're not actually. It's a private institution. It's a private company. So they don't seem to be answerable to the people.
Kevin, you are so right, and I agree with everything you said. A fascinating set of points, and you've got some experience of governance yourself, and that's what we don't have at the BBC, governance and accountability. Kevin, had a good day, and have a good day, and I hope that you enjoy the Remembrance Sunday service down there in Dorset, which is one of the most beautiful parts of the country, isn't it? London, on the other hand, less said the better. Tarquin is in the capital. Good morning, Tarquin.
Good morning, Mark. Great show. I'm very admire you being able to get up so damn early on a Sunday.
Oh, you're very kind. I couldn't do it without strong coffee, Tarquin, and your calls.
Indeed. Well, I mean, I could talk across all of the subjects. I mean, I initially rang in when I found my patriotic heart palpitating in my chest earlier on when, prior to Georgina and Anne and obviously Alec Penston, the guy that was on the TV the other morning.
Yeah.
It's just my grandfather. He took mustard gas in the trenches in the First War. Came back with one lung. He was never the same afterwards. Completely destroyed, shell of a man. And then I kind of I remember as a young boy looking into his eyes and thinking, what he must have seen. He worked as a machine gunner unit in the trenches, and he survived that war when all of his comrades died. He was only about 20 at the time, Mark, and he made it home, and he had a wife and son, and I was the offspring of that next generation. Had it not been for him, he had a German bullet taken through the top of his head. It scalped him, basically, and he was literally half an inch from death. And I often wonder, but for the grace of God, go all of us. It's just amazing how life is so fickle and yet at the same time magical at the same time. And we're just going to throw it all away because of these human rights lawyers who have somehow managed to pussyfoot around our UK Grand Constitution of Bill of Rights 1688-9 et al. And we have been completely outflanked by Fabians and Marxists and socialists.
Yes.
And we're at the 11th hour now, Mark. We're at 5 seconds to midnight on the doomsday clock for this brilliant nation, the best nation the world has ever known, that spawned the United States and their fantastic constitution. We're in deep trouble, guys. We need to really step up. We know we are. The thing is, we know we are. The fact is, we feel completely emasculated. I'm sorry, but that's the way it's going to have to be today, guys, by what these human rights Fabians are doing. We're on notice. They're on notice, should I say. They're on notice. We've got them. We know what they're up to now, and we're not going to let them get away with it, Mark.
No, Tarquin, very definitively, you can see from the polls, political change is coming. I think that is an absolute fact. I think, actually, that Reform UK's support is underrepresented in the polls, and I say that even though they are doing incredibly well, there are lots of shy Reform voters who are not going to say to a woke teenager in a hoodie on the street, I'll be voting Reform, but they will come out in 3-4 years' time. The issue is not change, that will come. What about delivery?
Well, you mean once they get their feet under the table?
Yeah.
My first operation.
Look at Boris, 2019. He was gonna put a tiger in the tank. There was so much optimism. Look at Tony Blair in '97. It didn't happen. Is there a danger that that's going to be the case with Reform?
There is, and we have to lance the blob because they're our next enemy.
I like
lance that blob, otherwise we're stuffed, aren't we, Mark? We don't lance the blob.
Most definitely. I mean, my thought about Reform is that they need a big majority, but they probably need a decade in power as well, Tarquin.
Well, we need 100 decades in power. We need to never go back to where we were before. This experiment in socialism. I mean, it sounds nice on fluffy paper. Oh yeah, but they've abused it now. The human rights people have abused it to the point where we're just nothing. We're not even Britain anymore because the spirit of Britain is they're messing around with the letter of the law. The spirit of the law, as in the rule of English common law, is that do no harm, and they are harming everybody.
Passion is what we love on this show. Tarquin, call me again soon. Have an excellent Sunday. God bless you too, Tarquin in London there, who is shooting from the hip, let me tell you, on the Home of Common Sense talk. And I've got to say that it's been the most busy and stimulating 4 hours. And it's been Remembrance Sunday, which is an important day. And I think we've acknowledged it very well by, A, reflecting on the sacrifice of those who did so much in the past, fighting in 2 world wars, but also the protection of that legacy so it's not squandered and that the country they fought for is not lost forever. Well, I'm delighted to say that picking up the baton at 10 is the one and only Peter Cardwell. Peter, I've got to say I'm disappointed with you that you weren't here yesterday. I know that you're on talk 11 days a week, but we can't do without you, to be honest. The whole thing just falls over.
Well, this is it. Well, I think Samara Gill did well in propping it up, it must be said. She was very good.
Great job.
But yes, it's great to be back. I had a lovely day off yesterday and so much to talk about today, because not only will we be going down to the Cenotaph, reflecting what's going on, of course, there observing the 2-minute silence. We'll be talking about this story that just people keep wanting to talk about, the World War II veteran on Good Morning Britain on Friday. A fascinating analysis there.
And this will be your first on-air comments about it, and I'm fascinated to hear what you think about that intervention, because it's been politicised on both sides, really, hasn't it?
Yes.
It's been a major talking point.
You're absolutely right. We're also talking about what Lisa Nandy has been saying this morning, the Culture Secretary. She says she doesn't think that David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, was being evasive at Prime Minister's questions. I mean, that's just absurd. Also, migration, fascinating. Mahmoud being told either to soften or toughen, depending on which way you look at it. Also, the welfare bill, pensions, all of this stuff that is being debated at the moment. The test balloons are going up to see what people think about it and what actually can be done at the what's politically possible at the budget, so we'll see what happens there. We'll talk as well about a little bit later on about welfare, as I say, about pensions and so on, and also the BBC to apologise for this doctored Trump speech. At long last, Samir Shah, the chairman of the BBC, is finally getting around to saying, actually, we screwed up, we shouldn't have, and we're sorry.
Most definitely. Speaking of sorry, by the way, I almost feel a tiny bit sorry for